Uh, so we'll just jump into it. Topic 1. In Washington State, a social studies teacher asked her class to clean cotton. The class was mostly white, with only 3 black students, 2 of which said they felt uncomfortable with the project. The teacher went on to say that we don't need slaves anymore to clean the cotton. When their mother called to complain, she was told that the students could be segregated from the rest of the class to avoid the assignment. Can we ever expect the black students in majority white schools will get fair treatment? That their concerns will be taken seriously? To give just a bit more on this situation, there was there was a situation. So a school in Washington State, white teacher, all white class, and this teacher literally brings out like a bag of raw cotton, and hands it to the kids and tells them to like clean it. And it was supposed to be about the Industrial Revolution, right, and the cotton gin, be a lesson about that. And then, but they felt the need to say things like, "Oh, we don't need slaves anymore." It was quite odd, right? And so the mother of 2 of these students were twins, calls and complains, and nothing. And the superintendent, so not the teacher, but the intendant, tells her that we'll segregate the kids. We'll pull your kids out of class rather than handling this. So now they've launched an independent investigation into all of this. So yeah, I'm wondering, for the experiences of black students and all white schools, or majority white schools, will their concerns ever be taken seriously? All right, Joe, do this.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we need not only anti-discrimination education, but anti-racism training in schools. Like, that's how you prevent stuff like this from happening. Should the teacher be disciplined? Yes. Should the administration be sort of reprimanded for their lack of action, as the mother claims? Probably not going to happen. You have a better fight to pick with the supervisor of the curriculum with social studies, but I'm sure she already knows, the mother or the parents already know this. But overall, it's pretty disappointing, and hopefully this is a reminder why we need this education in schools, so we don't have teachers just pulling out cotton in class and thinking that's a good idea. Especially considering these children were 14, they're grown enough to, you don't have to sugarcoat these things, but you also don't need cotton to teach part of curriculum, especially if we're talking about slavery. I'm sure we'll get more into that in the open.
Yeah.
Okay. Matt Ladd?
It's something that happens all the time. Like when you sent us the topic, it just sounded really familiar, and this has happened in Virginia. I've did a quick Google search. It's like happened in Wisconsin, Tennessee, like just all over the country. There are teachers who are finding very creative ways of talking about race related issues and are doing a terrible job of it. So I mean, I think this pulls us in a direction of figuring out, like, how should we talk about race in schools? How should we talk about history in schools? This is a very hard thing. I mean, this gets into the critical race theory stuff too, probably on some level, right? Like just figuring out how all this is supposed to work, and try to keep people from feeling ostracized as we talk about difficult topics. So, I mean, I think we have a long ways to go, and I'm not 100% convinced that we'll ever actually have. I mean, we're never going to have a perfect system on this front, or any front really, but I think we can get a lot further if we weren't politicizing issues like this. I think the funny part about this also is if you look at what Fox News is talking about when addressing incidents in school, they're going back to pronouns and stuff, and they're harping on that instead of looking at issues like this and saying, oh, hey, maybe we should come up with a better way of dealing with race in schools. So, I mean, as soon as we stop politicizing, I think we'll get somewhere.
Colorado.
I'm guessing you want me to speak now?
Why do you think I called your name?
Oh, I didn't hear you, actually.
Okay.
I didn't hear you either.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't hear you either.
Yeah, you're on mute.
I'm not on mute.
I guess it is.
I'm not on
I guess
mute.
it is called doing a prime.
Could you
Oopsie
not
daisy.
please? Thanks. Could you just go ahead? Thanks.
Yeah, it's all good. Okay, so I don't know. This sounds like really almost like Boondocks esque. It's kind of like that one episode where it's like I thought I could say the N word because he was always saying the N word and I'm confused. So yeah, it is a little bit I guess sadly comical. I that this was even like a conversation, but I can't even say that it's super unique either because even within my experience of being within the schooling system, I've heard teachers say some pretty whack shit to different black people within a class. So I think I don't know, it's just one of those things where I think yeah, we definitely need to work on a little bit more of like understanding of different types of cultures and yeah, diversity training really sounds pretty fucking fire right now. But I know it's just going to end up being on Fox News. But I do think that naturally no one can ever just inherently understand the experience of other people in the room without being tuned in on it, like in a form of training or unless they just happen to be around a lot of black people throughout their time. So I think it can be fixed, but people will kick and scream on the way there.
Thank you. Pyro?
Yeah, to Mad Latin's point and Katarana's point, this is like if I read this in 2006, I would think it's an Onion article and like I'd laugh it off, right? Because this is the type of shit like it's Boondocks-esque, like Katarana said. Like this is the type of shit like where it's just like you have to be so tone deaf as an individual, and then we're talking about educators. Like holy shit, how do you not think of an activity and think like, why would the three black kids maybe have a problem with an activity that's like, here's a bunch of cotton, now clean it, pick it, and rifle through it, right? Like, and then to respond to like, yo, Miss Teacher, Mr. Teacher, I'm uncomfortable with that. We don't need slaves anymore. Holy shit, that just displays a level of tone deafness right now that like to everyone who said it before me's point, like yeah, this shows that we do need some type of diversity training or like, some the type of education that Fox News and conservatives hate, the racial training and shit. Cause like if this is happening not only in just this school district but other states and shit around the country, like this is a big fucking problem. This shouldn't be that big of a fucking problem. Like does not take a rocket scientist to realize that like you don't give your black students cotton and then tell them to pick through it. It's literally a Dave Chappelle sketch.
Empress.
I actually think it's kind of interesting that Katarana would cite Boondocks because this is one of those instances in Boondocks where sometimes the problem with fiction is that it needs to be plausible. Reality doesn't work that way. A lot of those instances that you see of schools and teachers, particularly the N-word instance that you mentioned in particular, those are based off of true stories. And a lot of the time, the scenes that you see making fun of these people are very close to the real news stories that they're based on. So it does sound like a Boondocks sketch, right? At the same time, the Boondocks sketches are funny because they're talking about things that actually happened in many cases. So like I've seen the news report that the thing that you're referring to, I believe, if we're thinking about the same thing with the teacher saying the N-word, is based on, and it's like it's not that far off. I went to majority white schools all through grade school, from pre-K all the way through to college. I went to predominantly white institutions. And this kind of behavior, rather unfortunately, is commonplace. Not necessarily to this extreme, right? But like having all the kids with Spanish last names stand up and count in Spanish during, Hispanic History Month, and not the other Hispanic students in the room. So it's like like these kinds of things. Or like one time I remember I had a teacher. She gave Kende's paper to Charles and Charles's paper to Kende. You can guess whose skin color was what. She had egg on her face. The entire class laughed at her. But it's like casual racism. It's just a thing. And when you have people educating about race, or in my opinion, failing to, who don't have these kinds of racial experiences, trying to talk about something they haven't lived through, I can count on one hand. Maybe I think I can only think of 2 instances in which I had a person of color, like period, talk about race in school. from like an administrator perspective or a teacher perspective or a guest speaker twice in my grade school from K through 12. 2 different schools. It's just, of course, we're going to have these kinds of problems because people aren't being educated. People are, wallowing in their basically confirmation biases of racism, right, within the school system where they're surrounded by people who also hold these kinds of racialized views, right? It just gets worse and worse and worse, and this is how it manifests. So I think this is a symptom of a bigger problem. I mean, we talked about this last week. I think we need to re-implement integration busing because our schools are extremely highly segregated, and that's where a lot of these problems come from, as well as lack of representation in faculty and administration.
Thanks so much, Chris. Cosmo.
I heard some people say that this is sort of an extreme example of some of these things that's going on in schools, and sadly to say it's not. Like my brother has like gone into cotton fields to pick cotton. They just toss them a bag and like on field trips, they take kids to go do these things. For some reason, when it comes to teaching kids about slavery in a lot of these southern schools, like they have to think of some activities to do along with it. So it always involves cotton. It's like extremely weird and extremely like a lot of these incidents like and whatever. I'm tongue tied right now, but a lot of these things that happen don't get reported. So a lot of kids that are in these situations, like they're just used to it. So a lot of times they just go along with it and don't like say anything about it. So you don't hear about it like almost at all because it's just commonplace. And then like now this is like even though I've known this is going on, like this has been going on. Like this is the first time I think I've heard about it. Like someone reporting it and like reporting it to the news, like that they're cleaning cotton. Well, cleaning cotton is the least of it. Like they'll have kids out in the hot sun at a like cotton like plantation picking cotton. Like it's super sketch. But like like a lot of these like states practices when it comes to teaching kids about these things is like super sketch. We know there's deep rooted racism in the ways we teach, especially in some of these like Republican states. But we until there's awareness made about it, and until we start talking about it, it's not going to change. Which, fortunately, we are. But there's a lot of kids who like are just like they're just going along with it. And fortunately, this incident came up, and we can talk about it, and people can be punished for doing these things. But it's happening way more places, and they're doing much worse, way more sketch things when it comes to teaching kids about this era.
Okay. Thanks.
That's all I gotta say.
Thanks so much. Next, we have Bink Princess. The first time we've had this person on a closed panel. Please tell the world about yourself, and then intro to the topic.
Oh, hey, how you doing? You can obviously I'm on a black panel, so I don't have to say. Sorry, I'm a Southerner. I'm first gen American, and I just flex about school and talks about academia because I feel like anybody can be in academia, in my opinion, and I feel like we should be talking about stuff that is in academia with everyone else. So I'm on panels like this because I like talking and I have a big mouth and I talk so much. So that's me.
Thanks so much.
My thoughts on the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would say so far with like my my experience with teachers, I can probably say I had about like 3 or 4 like woke teachers, surprisingly, and they were old, some of them, and the others are like in their 20s. So I guess that's something to say. I would like to say that I don't believe history is complicated. Sorry, I don't believe history is complicated. I really love history. I'm like a history head. I don't believe history is complicated whatsoever if you give the right tools to, analyze it. And I do also have a time I'm in a predominantly black area where my teachers like where he like had us do a cotton project, and we had to talk about like the efficiency of like basically like how the cotton gin worked versus like people doing it by hand type thing. It was something, but overall I feel like these experiences are commonplace. It's just that people don't talk about it, like how everyone says, like the media and the internet in general does highlight the worst parts of society, and I feel like they're just putting the mirror to people's faces, and they should just realize that this is the reality a lot of people are living in. I think the thing that aggravates me specifically about like slavery and Jim Crow is because those specific parts of history are kind of, not even kind of, they are known for being a big racist time throughout for American history. And I feel like when people are racially insensitive, it doesn't make any sense to me. I had a white teacher and she taught social studies. This is like in 6th grade for me. And she was like, basically, you know, when you compare, like put yourself in a situation to like explain the situation, she kind of did that as like she's the slave master and we're her little like N-word type thing, and was trying to basically describe how mixed people were during that era, and like how they were getting like slaughtered. So like it was, everyone caught on because she literally caught herself while she was trying to explain. So it's like, it's kind of beyond me how like some people don't understand how it's like tone deaf, when in like reality, if you were to actually look at these parts of history, they blatantly say it's racist. So it doesn't make any sense like whatsoever. But that's just my thoughts. I don't know.
Thanks so much. My man Gsu Gambit back at it. Thank you for being here, my friend. Yeah, we are just getting started. First introduce yourself and then thoughts on the first topic.
Yeah, sorry for my tardiness today, but yeah, so I am Gsu Gambit. I'm a streamer on Twitch. Until recently, I've never been a drama streamer, but apparently there's been a lot of nonsense on Twitch that I've been involved in. But yeah, on to the topic. If you want to follow me, Gsu Gambit. Everybody listening probably already knows me. But yeah, so with this topic, this is like the last few weeks, all of the topics I've hit like very close to home to me. And it's like stuff that I'm like going through almost. But with this, it was just disgusting. So they asked like who could pick cotton the fastest. Some of the kids were saying, man, it must have sucked to be black. I could have never been a slave and pick cotton. This is garbage. I would have hated to be black. Like this was literally said in the classroom. Like I listened to like the news article. I mean the news broadcast for it. It was like 2 minutes on YouTube. But yeah, and then the superintendent or the principal originally like denied it happened, and they called back and they actually used the word segregated, like, oh yeah, we can segregate your children. So the whole situation is absolute nonsense and disgusting. I think it highlights what children in predominantly white schools go through. And the reason why this hits close to home is because my daughter is in kindergarten, starting next school year. And I had to look at all of the schools in the area and look at like the demographics for it and choose like, do I want to put my daughter in the best school, or do I want to put my daughter in a slightly not as good school that has more diversity? And we opted to go with the school that's more diverse because of very issues like this. So I've had lots of friends that went to primarily white not undergrad, but high school, middle school, and blah blah blah, and they all say things like this happen, and it's atrocious. So yeah, it affects the mental health of the people that are going through those situations. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Absolute nonsense.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Open to the panel.
I
Yeah,
also want to say that like I feel like one concept that is very important during this conversation is like the ages in which we actually like grasp these specific concepts, because I'm pretty like my little brother's in elementary school and he's talking about like race and like gender and all of the politics, and he like can, can like he can like barely spell like complicated words. Like he already understands these specific things, and at my age I was articulating those things too. There's something that I used to meme about my family about my complexion. My family is light, like my mom and my grandma are both light skinned. And I used to say, "Oh my gosh, mom, grandma, you're white," when I was like in kindergarten, like over and over again. Like we used to get into arguments about this. So kids grasp these specific concepts at an early age. It's not like they can't like, process what it is. They know what it is. They may not have the words to say it, but they definitely understand like what's going on, like hands down.
Yeah, there's a
And there's
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, there's actually like this doll test, and Fanatic actually
Yeah.
was one of the people who introduced this to me, and then I looked up and they did a recent one again in like 2010. But yeah, it basically showed children a white doll and a black doll and asked them questions, and a lot of the kids, white and black, both attributed more positive characteristics to the white doll than the black doll, while they also were saying the black doll is more like me. So it's disgusting the amount of things that are ingrained in like a lot of people are like, hey, you should do it with your daughter. And like I'm honestly terrified because I don't know what I would do if it matched the results of the prevailing narrative of all of the studies. So yeah, kids learn these things at a super small age, and my daughter's been in a daycare that's predominantly white. So there is probably levels of internalized
it's not just even at elementary age, right? It's younger than that.
No, I said
We have
daycare.
studies
Yeah.
that show racial
Yeah, 3 to
recognition can go as low as age 1 or 2 in some cases.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
right, these kinds of mirror touch recognition studies only have these results in Western countries. If you replicate these same studies in Asian and African countries, they don't have the same style of mirror touch recognition that predominantly people in the West have, which is used as a way to demonstrate recognition of tribalistic, ethnic, or racial concepts, right? And we still haven't figured out why. My speculation is that it has a little bit to do with like media and who's portrayed as like, within media that you're exposed to. So they're exposed to people of a variety of different races just by nature of the fact that media has been controlled by white people for a significant portion of global history, right? In terms of who's be able to distribute it, who has the money to process it, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think it's really, really important that we have racial exposure at a very young age between groups. Otherwise, these kinds of things ingrain and get worse with time, as you're pointing out. I think with the study that Fanatic and GSU are referring to.
Yeah, I'll never
Yeah,
actually
definitely.
forget the first time someone was emphatically racist to me. So I was 7 years old, second grade, predominantly white school, and a kid was testing out racism on me. He walked up to me and he called me the N-word. He said, "You are a N-word," and looked at me and expected like some sort of reaction out of me. Now, 7-year-old me, even though I was like, relatively, I was actually pretty well-rounded, like news-wise for my age. Like I knew a lot of stuff. Like I would watch Dateline with my parents, that type of thing. But I didn't know what the N-word was. They never talked to me about it. I had no idea. So I just like looked at him blankly and I was like, is this like you suck or what? Like I just kind of like moved on. And then it took me like, I don't know, a few years later to figure out, oh, hey, this is what's going on. And then I remember actually another incident that was slightly less directly racist. It was this kid who was in the first grade. So this was a year before the N-word thing. And he was talking to me about how awesome Germans were and how he was proud to be German and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why I remember this one is because I made a joke about Germany when I was like in the first grade. And I was like trying to do like, little kid talking back to this kid because we were having like an argument about how awesome Germans were, that type of thing. But like when I reflect on it later, I was just completely ignorant to the whole racism that was happening at the time. And I didn't address it even remotely correctly. And I mean, that's like, just the start. Like my entire schooling in this predominantly white district was just like racist thing after racist thing. Like as I grew older, I looked less black, I guess, or something. I don't know. And so the direction shifted. It started being like camel jockey, this and that, or whatever. But like this racism in the schools were like really bad, and this is like my generation, right? So these are people who are having kids now who are ridiculously racist back then, and they're going to be teaching their kids the same racist stuff. So like there's something that's like still actively happening that needs to be resolved here, right? Like this toxic culture.
Yeah,
I'll never forget when I was that age. I had a kid ask me, and it was the most ironic thing. This guy came up to me and he saw my hair, he saw my eyes, and he was a blonde hair, like blonde, like kind of nappy haired kid, right? Blue eyed, but he was very clearly white. And he just said to me, "Are you albino?" And I was like, "Do you even know what that word means?" I just looked at him. I was like, one, you look more albino than I do. Two, right? I was like, dude, like, what the hell? These are the same people who would then turn around and be like, no, you're not Puerto Rican because of your skin color, right? Like, and these were obviously like white people, you know, who don't understand concepts of race in a school in a city, private school in a city. So like, these are people from an upper class background. There was, I think, maybe 4 kids of color out of 60 in our class any given year. And it was just constant. Like we were hyper aware of our race because of the environment which we were in. We had one time this kid Jeremy yelled at my friend Madison to go back to his foreign lands. I'm like, my man's grew up down in Jersey. I don't know what you're talking about, man. I mean, like, I know Jersey's fucked, but like,
You get that all the time, like all the time. Go back to your country. Where are you from, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of an issue sometimes with like these things go on within a classroom, and a teacher just kind of was like, okay, and it just keeps on going about their day, and they're not going to address the
I
fact
think
that
teachers
anyone's
join in on it. Like they'll be making fun of a kid for their race, or they'll be making fun of a kid for whatever, you know, intrinsic characteristic, and then the teacher just jumps in on it. I found out like years after I had one teacher that when I was out from school, they were making fun of me for being disabled and for my race, right? But to my face, they were like, you know, they were like trying to be like a supportive teacher and shit like that. It's like, no wonder you were such a dick when shit went down, right? And when I actually like needed assistance, it's because you were fucking shit talking me the entire semester when I was fucking dealing with a disability at home that I only had for like 2 years at that point. So it was just like it was like really, really disgusting stuff. But like there's like the passive ignorance, like I don't see it, I turn my eye, or like I don't see what's wrong with this. But like there's also active participation that happens all the time.
Yeah, I just also want to say that this, I think from what I've seen, is something that can act both ways though, and I hate being the both ways person, but there've been circumstances in which for a temporary amount of time I've gone to predominantly Black schools, and when people would say you're acting white, the teachers would just be like, la la la, I'm just gonna keep on writing on the fucking board. Like that's okay to say to, like, kids can say that to each other and say that, like, you know, it's okay for people to go ahead and prescribe certain behaviors that a Black person's doing to whiteness. And like that's chill. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
like
so
on
now-
that note, Katarana, like I got that a lot too, except for like the teachers never really la-di-da about it. They did the really weird thing where they would like stop the entire class and be like, yeah, why are you saying him acting like a white person's a bad thing? You should all want to act like white
Yeah.
people. It means you're acting
Hands
smart.
down.
And every time I heard this, I'm like, wait a minute. Hold the fucking phone. That doesn't mean I'm acting smart or dumb just because I'm not acting quote unquote white. And like, took me a minute to figure out what those teachers were actually trying to say. And we all know they thought the brown kids were dumb and stupid.
Yes. That's an occurrence that's actually aggravating to me. I was in chorus and we're talking about this because one thing you have to do is I guess pronounce your syllables correctly in order to actually like sing in some cases. So what happened is that it's, mind you, I go to a predominantly Black school. So we were talking about, you know, how we pronounce things and everything. And everyone in the classroom was like, we do not feel like pronouncing every single syllable just to make you feel comfortable. And my teacher turned around and was like, your ancestors fought for your rights to have an education, therefore you should be using every single syllable. And I'm just like, just because you are quote unquote like in the this stereotypical like black kid, like the guy sagging and all this other stuff, does not mean their brain is like melting and rotting. They can literally be like one of the most educated persons you've ever talked to. And in my personal experience, that's how it has been. Like, they can have a good conversation and actually articulate themselves well, just that nobody gives them the time of day, because that's quote unquote the ghetto, the black culture, gang culture, fuck shit that everyone wants to spew for society as black people. So
Chris?
I always hate to be the person that says like a lot of these things are like American things, but like I can't help but to think that I'm just, when my time of living in predominantly black countries has happened, I've never had people tell me anything about being white or acting white. I don't know why there's this whole like I don't know why race comes so much into conversation in American institutions, like your job or your work or your school or your university. I don't understand why it needs to always come into place, because I've never ever had to have conversations about like people that are of different races in countries that are predominantly black. I haven't lived in any predominantly Asian countries, but when I was living in the Caribbean, no one ever looked at the Syrian kids and were like, so um do you guys have bombs at your house? Or like we never had
they don't do that. Their
conversations like that.
conception
Yeah.
of race is different.
Sorry, let's let in.
one-
One second. Chris?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt because I wanted to kind of bring the topic back to the go back to the subject, and this is all like good stuff to talk about. But I wanted to like talk about how the way these things are like these black subjects are taught in schools isn't unique to the black subjects. This is a symptom of like how like history is taught in a very benign, very like contextless and like just dead like just dead way I'm from Ohio. I'd say it all the time, like in my tri-state area we go to field trips all the time where they have settlement reenactments or like preserved settlements, so that you go and see how the people back in whatever era lived their lives, and you go to these places and it's very like you learn the ways they cooked, that the cabins they lived in, the clothes that they made and stuff like that, how they made soap. But you don't like you go around and you do these things, you make candles and stuff, but they don't ever like you don't get taught like, hey, this is the town square where they burn you if you were a witch. Oh, here's the shack that they had some of the slaves that they had here, if they had any, right? They'd live in this shack. Or you know why there's no Indians around here, or because they drove them out years before the settlement was set up, and they did some crazy things to do that. And like you're just getting this like this super whitewashed version of history, and it's not even like necessarily whitewashed, it's just so empty, right? You're just getting taught facts that means barely anything, right? Just contextless like stuff, like lacking context. So when they teach about like other things like involved in Hispanic history, like indigenous history and black history, they apply it the same way, which is why you get these tone deaf lessons about cotton and like what it's like the power dynamic of being a slave to a master. It's very like it's very lazy, and for a long time it still hasn't changed. It's just the way we teach like young children, because we don't expect them to be able to handle the like real truth of the things that happened back then. So you give them this lazy view of history, hopes that they remain interested. But I think because we do that, that's why a lot of kids aren't interested, right? It's just like this very robotic way of teaching, this very like unfun way of teaching, and you don't get the context of history. And I think if we did that, students would be way more engaged, they'd be way more understanding, and they come out way more knowledgeable than they do Like that's why a lot of kids like grow up just hating history because of the way it's taught. It's just not fun and it's very benign.
There's a
Yeah.
problem with every subject that teachers teach, where they teach it fucking. It's the most boring shit ever, and I think just basically every subject, you're just sitting there in what is essentially jail for children, 8 hours a day, just counting down the hours until you go home, and that's like not really something that's specific to history, but I have found that within, I guess, social sciences specifically, there tends to be an almost comical amount of lack of awareness of like how to speak to um groups of which history does involve, uh, in a way that isn't absolutely ridiculous. And perhaps this happened to other groups within my classroom than Black people, but I just remember keeping track of the ones that were directed towards Black people. And like when I was in my civics class, a teacher asked the like darkest girl in the room, "Hey, Karen, you know the Miranda warning, right? You know the Miranda warning, right? Like people in your family have heard you know about the right to remain silent," as if she was gonna fucking sit there and
The
recite it at 12
fuck?
years old. Yeah. Or like somebody asked me because I was Caribbean, do I know any boat people, people that have moved to
Oh my
Florida due to like
god.
taking a boat there? And I'm like, why the fuck would I know boat people? Like, why are you asking me this dumbass question? But then like I'm pretty sure I just was very cognizant of the fact that this was something being brought up, and I was specifically offended because I was like, why are you asking Black people such weird questions? But I think there's an issue across the board for all these different types of historical phenomena, just looking to the one person in the room. Hey, Raj, can you talk to us about Hinduism? And he's like, I'm Sikh. Like, why are you asking me this question? Like, just dumb shit like this. And diversity training would be very nice.
My
Uh,
personal favorite out of all of those questions is like when they're talking about like fatherless homes and shit, and they all look like they all give the Black kid the side eye, like yeah, Joe, why don't you tell us about the homeless epidemic in America? And it's just like, dude, my parents are happily married. They've been for 20 years. What are you talking about?
Right.
yeah,
I think the
but
thing that
they do this for all of us. We're all just a bunch of tokens in a classroom. If you happen to be in in a majority white school, or it ends up being another type of issue if you're not. And
Oh,
it's so strange why like I'm essentially being asked as like a very much a minor to go ahead and explain historical context to a classroom, or go ahead and cite the Miranda warning, or hey, can you go ahead and explain all of the political like issues of like the dictator in the 90s for the class? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, my family left that country in the 60s. Like, why are you asking me this question? So
yeah.
it's just like
so I guess
It,
the
I
question.
think
Oh,
like I think the thing that like aggravates me is like this is like close again like why I say like talking about like academia stuff whatever. Like it aggravates me that like the reason why like some people don't believe in like teaching stuff earlier is because like kids aren't able to grasp the concept, or like kids are going to be scarred. Like my guy, I was not ready to be learning in 4th grade that like a slideshow and like a actual detailed recollection of Native Americans being killed by dogs. I wasn't ready for that. So if you guys have like the guts to like teach slavery and genocide, I'm pretty sure you can cram, a little bit more history than that. Like I was in like 2nd grade when I saw the whole picture of the guy's back and it was whipped up. I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade when I learned that. So I feel like when it comes on to history, people are really weird about it and are really like ignorant to the importance of history. Like I feel like a lot of people are worn down, like since it's like a Black tunnel or whatever. I tend to see a lot of like Black people who are like growing up like middle school, it's like high school, that get so tired of like learning about slavery and Jim Crow, when in my personal opinion, I feel like there's importance in learning that, and there's literally like an extraction to be taken away, but they don't teach you to extract like knowledge from these things. They just give you a bunch of facts and you passively like absorb it, and that's it. Like I was talking about I really just ranting at this point, but I was talking about Black History Month. It's Black History Month, and I said I feel like what people should be doing is actually seeing how these things are important and why you should be aware of what you're doing. So for an example, right, the thing that I brought up was like the minstrel shows, for example, right? The minstrel shows, if on its face, shows the importance of media. On its face, literally on its face, shows the importance of media and how you consume media, and media when it comes on to representation and portrayal. And if you do not get that at the end of the day, it's just like you're just passively viewing history. And I feel like at a young age, when it comes on to history, you should be able to look at it and actually like deconstruct it, instead of just seeing like, oh, well, they lived happily ever after, or there was just a war and the war just happened for no apparent reason. Like, you're supposed to be able to cut down on why it's important and like why these specific things like happen in the first place, like the characterization.
Yeah, I just see that as like the whole idea where people say like, no, we can't teach history properly because like we don't know at like what age like kids will start to understand racial relations or like understand the history. Like I would say, okay, like I would somewhat want to believe that argument if it wasn't for the fact that what they do instead is just give fake information. Like, oh, Christopher Columbus was just a great guy and he was just cutting over and he was trying to see what was happening over here. Like that's what they give. Instead, they give revisionist history because somehow that's going to be better for us to go ahead and understand history. Because like the little 8-year-old brain can't understand what genocide looks like. So instead, let's just go ahead and create this really weird, like nationalistic, patriotic vision of history for everybody.
I wanted to try to move the conversation to. All right. Before I say anything, let's go to Pyro, then GSU.
So because we were kind of going back to what like Chris Cosmo said earlier, and I do think he's right on a lot of what he said in that statement, that like we get so bogged down trying to make it accessible with like these little activities and these field trips. And when he said that, one of the questions I had was like, I'm personally like okay with the dumb little field trips and shit, right? Like if you want to take your class out to Fort Sumter and learn how they manned the fort and shit and how they dressed and hear the dudes in the funny speak, that's fine. My question is like, is that the place, and are these activities the place to like go into some of these deeper fucking topics about like the racism and shit, right? Because like it's one thing to have an activity about like, oh, the Industrial Revolution, let's learn about like the hand crank or whatever the fuck they built back then, but like is the activity like are these activities the proper place to be like, ah yes, and then we're going to talk about slavery and like all of the impacts that had on these people and shit? Because for me it just don't seem like that's the right place. When I think of like these activities and these field trips and shit, and maybe like the educators here can correct me, seems like these are things to like get the kids interested, not dump the heavy truth load on them. And we need to learn how to do that better within the classroom. Yeah, like we can do both. I think one of the biggest things, like we neglect doing that in the classroom, where it's like, yo, okay, kids, this is heavy truth day, right? No fun activities, no, hand turkeys or whatever. We're gonna get into the nitty gritty of it. Like, I don't know, like that's just maybe something I was thinking.
I don't know, because like I was kind of interested in history at a young early age, and I already dumped like 2 things that were kind of like dumped on me. So I'm gonna come from like a very like biased position, but like we watched like a little like documentary on like World War One, and had like a very graphic detail of how like fucking Franz Ferdinand and his wife was fucking assassinated. Like we had like very graphic stuff, and I feel like these things should, like, how do I say it? History is something that I like making jokes out of, and you can really make fun and light out of history if you actually know the facts to begin with. And to only view it in like a sunshine and rainbow perspective isn't going to like accurately, like, I don't know, it's not going to accurately encompass what history is. And it's just like basically putting a wall between like plenty of stuff. I feel like there is room for having activities, and there's room to like.
Well, that's one of the reasons.
Like stuff like that. I don't think like deep topics such as like slavery should have like a quote unquote like project. I don't
Well,
think
no,
that's
like
a thing that
that's
like
one of the reasons I
should
like bring
have
up the
it.
question, right? Because like I do agree there should be like history is a fucking boring ass subject. Like I come like from the same bias as you. I loved history. I've loved history from like early on in my life. The question I brought up is like, cool, I'm okay with having these activities and having these field trips, but like when we want to accurately portray how, you know, terrible something in our history was doing, if we're taking someone to, like these kids to like a field trip down to the plantation in Georgia or some shit, how do you accurately portray with reenactors or whatever how fucking brutal slavery was? Because that was like something really brutal, and like while these
Yeah,
kids
so
can handle it, how do you organize
yeah,
that?
I
That's
so
don't
what I'm
I
think
curious
don't
those
about.
are like aspects of his like if I was a teacher personally, I would probably have it so that you would see you would know like the details of like the quote unquote like bad stuff, I guess you would say, but also like know like some of the cultural stuff that came from it or stuff that like events that happened. So, like for an example, right? If we were talking about like the 60s for an example, right? Maybe we're talking about like the civil rights movement and whatever the case may be. Maybe the project, maybe an activity that we may have is, you know, having like an old fashioned dance or talking about like some of the iconic stuff that came from it, not just like sitting here like, guys, you know, we're going to have a protest inside of the fucking like gym or some shit, and you know we're all gonna dress up as a Black Panther because that's who we like. That's who we're definitely going to do. That's what we're gonna have a sit in and
Do
actually
people?
like we're
But
not. Why would you? It's not something that like as a kid. I don't think that's something you should like be exposed to, in my
So
opinion.
let's
More
go
of like
to
physically. That doesn't make any sense.
GSU. Sorry, just wanna
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I've just been listening and taking all of this in. I don't know. I think these things are more delicate than we're putting off. Like this whole brutality thing and showing like how like I think Pyro, you and Chris said it, like how brutal these things really were. Like these things are gonna have negative effects, and if it's also in these situations where it's like a PWI with Black people, they are gonna say the things like what was said. They're like, "Oh man, I would have hated to be Black," right? Like I think these things are far more delicate than y'all are like giving credit to it. I don't know how we accurately teach these things. I'm not saying that we should definitely like whitewash history. I think what Bink was saying earlier about like understanding like application and being able to draw information from this and maybe point to these are why we have maybe some cultural problems today. But even a lot of that can uh influence the thinking of these kids, right? And they can make Black kids think that they're less than, they can make white kids think that they're better than, right? So I don't think these things are as cut and dry as y'all are like putting them out to be. Like we had an all Black everything panel, right? And I think Prime asked like who's ever been somewhat like sad that they were Black, right? And almost everybody on the panel except me was like, yeah, I've had those feelings before. So these topics in the way that they're taught in classes are there, like Joe would say, like talking about race in America is complicated, right? I don't I don't know if there's a cookie cutter solution that's just like, hey, yeah, let's, because like imagine this world where we want to teach them more brutally. In this class, it could have been, hey, white kids, let's fake whip the Black kids, right? Like it can get silly. So I don't know exactly where we draw the line on these things, but I don't think it's as simple as five head. Let's teach them the brutality.
No, like
I have to
okay,
push back on
like
that. Hold on.
uh,
This like history in general is brutal. Like it's not that like
yeah.
Black history is the only like point in history where people
Life
were
is brutal.
brutalized and like oppressed and like made less than
I
by
didn't
other
say that.
groups of people. No, that's what I'm saying. So like we are taught about so many like like parts of history, right? And all of these parts of history were given a false view of what it was really like. We're given like it's like sprinkled in roses and like sunshine and rainbows. And even when we're talking about revolutions and wars, it's like glossed over and like we don't really understand the impact of these things. So that's why kids like it, and we don't like relate them to how like they affect people today. So this is why kids like will be in schools and still be racist when they hear about these things. So when they get taught about these black issues, because they aren't taught how to empathize or what empathy even looks like and how it relates to like everyone. Like it's like you can find a group of white people in history that were like done they were done some horrible things to them, right? And like if people like were taught like kids were taught to empathize with these things like with the people in these situations throughout history in general, then when you get to the black history subject, you're not going to get a bunch of kids talking about, oh, I would have hated to like be black, because at a certain point you would have hated to be whatever like ethnicity of white you were at the time, right? It wasn't all like what white is today, it wasn't what it was back in history. So if you were Irish at one point, you would have probably had a terrible time. If you were like Greek or like just any ethnicity, there's something that happened in history to people that we can like teach kids to empathize with. And because of this, like we're kids are growing up really stupid, right? Unless you have unless you have a teacher that's really pushing these things to you, unless you're really curious and you're the type that really wants to learn and you dig for this information. A lot of kids just grow up with this false like view of history. That's why we have a bunch of people voting for Trump and like talking about how how great some of these people were back in the day, because they have no idea what it was really like and they were never
Or
taught.
they know what it was like and they got the exact opposite take of what you're assuming they'll get.
I
That,
mean,
like,
like
No,
the thing
Okay,
that
think that
like
is-
people don't
Americans are
understand.
massively
kinda
ignorant about
wanna-
history by and large, particularly Trump voters. We have evidence that shows this. And I think it's also
American-
important to recognize here that we can design, like, it seems like there's 3 or 4 core issues here, right? It's when you introduce the content, right? What content you're introducing, how you go about delivering the content, and I guess the mindfulness of the psychological impact of the content. These 4 things all need to be improved across the board in our
One
education.
thing that
We
I
need
think-
diversity
wait,
focused
wait,
surgeries.
wait,
We need to
wait,
balance this
wait.
content
Wait,
with things
but-
that engage students in a variety of different learning methods.
But
So I
you
think to an
think that-
extent I agree with Pyro that these kinds of tactical, like or whether it be like I look at something like Monticello, right? And I see it as something that can be used much better than it's currently being used, because it does whitewash a lot of the slavery and atrocities that were put forth by Thomas Jefferson, right? At the same time, there are certain elements of portraying that it really drives home in a visual way, in a tactile way, right, that you can physically engage with, in auditory lectures that you receive, and the combined aspect of that, which balance, and again, I don't think they balance this part properly, right, but balancing the serious aspects and impactful aspects with things that are more lighthearted and kind of keep people engaged with the subject matter while allowing time for psychological recovery. Like,
lighthearted.
you can design
Like,
things around this. It
So I
takes
actually
a
wanna
lot
break
of
that
work
down.
and it takes a focused effort towards your target audience.
So I think that we can actually break it down to 2 specific things that we're working out here. Like the first is what is being taught, and the second is who's teaching it. So like the who, you've got folks who are still ignorant enough to think that a raw cotton picking assignment is all right
Exactly.
or whatever. So we have to deal with the who separately. As far as the what, we were talking about engagement and keeping people like entertained and not bored or whatever else. And like, yeah, some of the stuff is going to be really heavy, but the fact of the matter is, outrage is interesting. Like, I don't think people get bored if we say, hey, and by the way, trigger warning, I'm probably going to talk about some really graphic, violent things that have happened in history. So if you don't hear about this stuff, you probably shouldn't be listening to me talk right now. But like, there was an incident that I didn't even hear about, and I do a decent amount of research, where a pregnant woman in Georgia was lynched in the 1910s. And like, they literally, I don't really want to say this on stream, but it was extremely violent. Like if you read the like the step by step, how they killed her, how they killed the baby, all that stuff, it was disgusting. It was horrifying, and you never hear about it in schools. And the fact of the matter is, things like that need to be talked about. These people are forgotten, and they've been brutally murdered in horrible ways. So like,
Mad Lad, the problem
we do
is
need to hold on. The thing that we need to do is lay on the heavy periodically and not make this like some sort of group project field trip thing. Make it a like, hey, this happened in history, you need to know about this. Tulsa wasn't even heard about in like the greater American community until Watchmen made it a TV show. And like, you know, you see movies, what was it, Mississippi Burning? I think it was called, like things like that, need to be shown more in school. And like even my whitewash school showed that movie, by the way. Like it was something we actually saw in class, and we actually got to see some of like the visceral, violent racism that occurred during the Jim Crow era. So like I think you can actually keep it entertaining while still like brutally honest. And I think
Like the
the idea
problem,
of like,
like
whitewashing it and trying to keep kids like lighthearted and entertained and worrying about that part is like not important. Like teachers will figure out how to make it lighthearted anyway. We just need to
True.
focus on the dark
that's a
shit
shit
and
take.
make sure the dark shit is actually being shared. With
okay,
everyone.
no, like
Okay, so, like,
I gotta hit back
Pyro,
about,
go
I
ahead,
gotta
Pyro.
hit. No, I gotta hit back against this real quick because, like, I agree with you for like 1/4 of that point, right? Like, you can bring up like a lot of these really dark events to try and like get the hook in. The problem is when teachers do the thing that teachers have to do and explain how society's got like that, it's really fucking boring, right? Like, if we're taking historical examples, we can, no, it is. Like we can talk about like Andrew Jackson and all the terrible shit he did to natives, right? But then if we're going to talk about how he actually managed to get, Congress to go along with him, the language and rhetoric he spewed to like kind of gaslight certain Indian tribes into trusting him and shit. That shit can get really dense and really boring, and that's the problems that we're seeing
So don't
with
make
a
it
lot
dense.
of
Like
teaching.
some folks are really good at talking about history in a way that's not boring. You can listen to different history podcasts, watch them cover the
These
same
aren't-
topics, and then identify which podcasters are boring and which
No.
podcasters are interesting.
But I'm
I
not
think
talking about
what is
podcasters. I'm
this?
talking about like teachers and
Same
shit.
thing.
Yeah,
like
we're
some teachers are just
Wait,
boring.
wait,
What is
to
this
make this very clear, we're talking about the teachers that have biases that are having black kids pick cotton, like play
Right,
with
and that's
cotton in
separate
class.
too, right?
No, it's not separate. Y'all are basically saying the system that has failed us such that where we are talking about this today, we should make it more gruesome and it'll be better. Like it's so
no,
silly.
like I would
What?
want to like clarify like what I was talking about. So when I had made the statement of basically being able to analyze history, when I took my class for history and like mine is like fucking AP type shit, yeah, what we had was literally categories in order to view history. So you would view it from an economic perspective, a cultural perspective, and so forth and so forth. And I feel like giving kids the tools to do that and end up having their own ways of viewing that is okay. I don't think like when I say like extract knowledge that I specifically mean like in a kind of like social justice warrior view type now. I
Oh
also
no, I
do
was
believe
agreeing
that
with you.
people
I
are
wasn't
like
I wasn't disagreeing with you. I was agreeing with what you said.
oh yeah. Well I feel like also the thing that like would how do I say it, would kind of not watered down, but I guess the point what I'm trying to make is that the reason why people are very non-infected and don't have like compassion towards some of these parts of history is because of how pushed on it is. Like that's how I personally feel about it, because I'm, as I said, I go like my school in 9th grade, we were talking about like Jim Crow, and every single time we're like trying to start the conversation, every single person in there was saying, why are we learning this? We learn this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Every single time you see a slave movie, it's literally the same exact layout and barely actually shows like the more dense side when it comes on to like how brutal people were actually being like hurt. When it comes on to like stuff in like the 1960s, like how you describe, they don't really talk about stuff like that. The most you'll say is, oh, there were lynches, period, and then like people got pushed down while walking around the street, and then that's it. They don't actually talk about these deep things, and I feel like the reason why, as I said, people are so like non like empathetic or whatever the fuck toward these things is because they're like it doesn't bother them anymore. They're just like tolerant at this point. Like that's
They
just how
can't be
I feel.
desensitized if they haven't been exposed, though, right?
I
I'm
mean,
coming
yeah,
in.
I
but
think
if
it
we're
depends on the
talking about like
environment
So,
and the
a
types of
small
students.
part from like from first grade to like high school, you're going to like not care about learning it anymore. And I personally advocate for like learning more like diverse parts of history early on, and not just having like a high school thing. I think it's stupid as fuck just to have it just in high school thing. Like personally.
let's go to Katarana and then Chris.
I think this is like a bit of like a pedagogical training failure in the system. because when you're going ahead and getting a degree in history, it's not like they got the very cute, like, watered down version of history. I hope nobody's getting a full university degree being like, and then, the slaves were free, and then the Civil Rights Act passed it, and everything was fine. Like, it wasn't just, I'm hoping that's not the education people are learning in university. But for
It
some
is.
reason, people are graduating from university with history degrees thinking everything's chill.
People are
Right.
graduating with history degrees, with education, especially around civil rights, incredibly insufficient based on the subject matter that's taught.
Yeah, I feel like
Like,
small things too can like make a difference. Like the fact that there's like like a misconception about like slavery, that like basically like the black guys, like the black folks in Africa were like, ayo, like just here's my homie, like here's my granddaughter, like you can just have my
Yeah, the
child.
whitewashing
Like
of that is terrible.
it's terrible. Like the fact that I just now learned like how many like slave revolts happened truly like aggravates me to like my
Let's
core.
Katarana, finish your point. Go ahead.
Small stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, if that's something people are graduating with, thinking everything was pretty like just mellow, then that's awful, and that in itself needs to be a point of contention. But typically, when you're going ahead and crafting up curriculums, you're supposed to think a bit about the other perspective and how to make sure you're making things that make sense, and that one is going to be engaging, but also thinking about how are the people that you're teaching going to interact with that curriculum. And I could say that in my experience, I don't have any form of education training, but I quite immediately, if I do something that is wrong, when I do any type of outreach, I can recognize, oh fuck, like I really shouldn't have done that. And anybody with any form of internal, I guess, internal checks and balances should be able to see, yo, this is pretty weird, and I shouldn't be doing this. And like, even as somebody that's like in STEM, I realize I can have those types of problems too. I did an experiment with kids where I went ahead and wasted food in a country with food scarcity. And afterwards, I was like, that was really stupid. I should not have done that. That was a really bad idea. The kids didn't complain, but I also thought to myself, the kids didn't need to complain. I recognized that was not a good thing that I did. And next time when we go back and do our work, we cannot do that again. That was really stupid. So it's just really strange to me with these adults that have hopefully this wasn't this person that made this curriculum's first year of teaching. There should have been a lot of internal thinking. Hey, if I was black, how would I like to clean cotton? And if she was just like, it's chill, that's the problem fundamentally, in which pedagogical training, teachers do workshops like all the time. I remember when I was younger, there would be days off because a teacher had workshops. So like, how is this over their time of teaching not something that they haven't addressed yet? Don't make racist curriculums. This is ridiculous. Like, there's really nothing that can go ahead and excuse this kind of behavior. Like, you are supposed to be consistently always thinking about the perspectives of other people that you're teaching, and the fact that this was just forgotten, it's egregious. It's pretty offensive too. So I don't know. Like, it feels like this shouldn't even be a question. Can we ever expect black students in schools to get fair treatment? Like, this should even be a conversation. I had to interact with these kids in a different country for a week, and I was able to think in their perspective. So how are people not realizing that you don't make a bunch of black kids clean cotton, and then when they complain, saying you can't be segregated if you want? Like,
I can tell
what?
you how.
So-
I can tell you
Yeah.
how. It's
Um,
because throughout your your teaching, right? You don't connect the context of these things. Again, like I said, you're not being taught how to empathize. All right, like, so you have people who are graduating. You have them here on Twitch, get degrees, and still don't think systemic oppression exists. Right? Like, these people exist, and like you can go through a whole your whole lifetime in school, get all sorts of degrees, and still come out insanely dumb about history. Now, I
I'm
like GSU was like talking about how like we shouldn't be so we shouldn't. What I was saying was being more brutal towards the kids, and like having some really brutal things shown to them at an early age. No, I'm saying like we shouldn't cut the context out. We can we can like censor the level of like atrocities that we're teaching at ages, and we can like ramp it up as they get older. I'm not saying show some 10-year-olds like the paintings in the Vatican. You know what I mean? Like, but at least teach them the real human life drama of what happened. This is why kids aren't interested. It's because we're like just telling facts, right? You teach
Yeah.
a war and you tell about what generals sent their troops where. You're not necessarily saying why. We don't talk about why slavery was a thing. It's just that like these people did this, and like they were selling slaves. They were evil. We don't tell about why they found it necessary to do it, because there was like a huge economic boon for them, right? It was economic value on their part that they were gaining because they had like labor that they didn't have to pay for. So we like, and like just like the context and the drama is really interesting. That's why we have TV shows. To say that
Yeah.
kids would be interested, they would be interested. It's just that the way we teach teach history, the way you have this lined up in your textbook is so like soulless and benign. There's no the in between drama is not discussed. The conversations would be interesting because you could have those conversations with your classmates and you can like mirror those in class and have discussions like that, and see how kids themselves work it out and see how that relates back to what happened in history.
One of the things I heard,
I think the thing that
and
like
it,
So
I think the thing that like
Kyle will respond, and then we're gonna go to Joe Lewis. Okay.
okay.
What is there for me to respond to?
I thought you were responding. I thought I heard you responding.
oh no,
Okay, sorry.
Pyro.
Well, then Pyro respond.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say real quick, like, yeah, Chris Cosmo is 100% right. One of the things one of my history professors told me is like the way we teach history is abysmal. Like we really do take the humanity out of it. Like everyone loves reading a good novel about a hero or some shit fighting an uphill battle, but like you bring them a history textbook and be like, okay, here's where that lore is based off of, and they're like, no, it's boring, and it's like, yeah. You read that shit, there's no human. It's like, this is what Thomas Jefferson did, and then he did this, and then he did this, and these were some of the effects, and that was it. And unfortunately for us, these people were real, like you and me, and they didn't think like that. They didn't go about their shit like that.
Okay. Let's go to Joe Lewis.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot. Charging up a take. I'm gonna try. So so I guess like to center my perspective on this a little bit, because I haven't really said shit. Some things that kind of I've mentally accepted is that racism is embedded within society and institutions. Period. There's no caveat. There's no but. It's just how it is. Also, we have to actively start doing, from thinking of prescriptions, right, is we have to start recentering these experiences and voices of Black people, of people of color, of Indigenous people, because right now it's incredibly insufficient. If we're thinking in terms of history, since this topic came from a history teacher, or social studies rather, it's the archives. Like archives, when I say archives, I'm talking about libraries, educational texts, studies, all of that stuff. They're not neutral. And this idea of objectivity is just a myth that perpetuates white hegemony. Furthermore, like as we recenter these voices, we have to understand that that doesn't mean only including violence, racism, oppression. Like it's very easy to fall into those traps where we only talk about the violence, where we only talk about the racism, we only talk about the oppression. Like these are stories that have more variety than violence. And on top of that, what you guys are talking about, which I agree with, is readjusting the show and tell approach of education and like breaking past this master slave or instructor, or now we call it the instructor student hierarchy, right? We got to allow students to be knowledge producers. And then on top of that, we have to be dedicated to active learning. I think all of you alluded to that in some type of way. And by being better, by allowing students to be knowledge producers, that allows a better approach to active learning. And then on top of that, the stories of these people are never told. This is why we have to seek like history podcasts just to get full context of situations. It shouldn't necessarily be that way. And on top of that, we have to challenge, like, again, if I'm using like charged language here, because I got to identify the enemy, like the master narrative of understanding a single truth. Like not everything is 2 + 2 = 4. Not everything is 1 + 1 = 2, especially if we're talking about history. And then like in terms of like prescriptive things that I think we could do, right, is like we got to acknowledge that like the systems of power, racism, privilege, all of that is present in all aspects of archival work. It exists everywhere. and we got to subvert this idea that these texts are neutral. On top of that, we need to address the current issues within the archives, and then like just empower like not only the educators but the ones who are making the curriculum to understand that as they go in there and change the influence that these archival works have, because some teachers have been teaching from the same textbook for decades. And on top of that, like social justice in archival work by recognizing like the larger societal responsibility to communities, individuals, past and present, right? So we got to prove, and this is on the educators, right? And the educators and people who are making the like sort of like the curriculum, right? They have to prove and show goals for implementation, and then also measures of accountability when those goals aren't met. And on top of that, two more things, I'm gonna shut the fuck up. Like we had to like include practices and knowledge systems outside of the established tradition. And this is what like triggers conservatives up their sphincter. We got to incorporate like more self-reflective practices, cultural competency, humility, and critique just the normalized expectations of these archives and these archival works. And on top of that, and this is like the most important thing for me, it's just like operating out of a commitment to minimize harm and provide care not only to the educators but also to the students that you're educating. I think like all of those things can happen at the same time. Unfortunately, as long as we maintain that these curriculums are impossible to change, I don't know what else we can do moving forward. But the first step to start is with the texts. The second place is all the things with the educational system, not only with students that are being aspiring teachers, but the curriculum that they're being taught and how schools exist. It's a lot of things, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Okay. Does anyone respond to that?
Everything you said was exactly right.
I kind of oh, go ahead.
I,
Did you answer the question?
I want to get towards one thing that was said in the article about them using segregation. I want to talk about how that's used in school as a tool for a lot of things. But go ahead, Matt. Then I want to go into that.
I wanted to add one more thing, which was the textbooks and how those are actually provided to the schools as well. Like I feel like on some level this topic is deliberately made boring and uninteresting by the folks who are not just producing the textbooks, but like the school boards who are approving of these textbooks, I'm sorry, the state boards that are approving these textbooks. They have a tendency to choose the textbooks that don't address this issue as thoroughly as they should. So I think that would be another way we could improve, at least in creating a standard, is to go after these boards of education.
Yeah, I mean I agree with you, and this is like one of the frustrations that I have now, where it's like we have complaints about the education curriculum and how it's insufficient, especially when it comes to history and this talk about history. But then when the rubber hits the road, when these board of educations are making these meetings to propose, like, okay, what does the community propose of what textbooks we ought to pursue, and nobody fucking shows up. The same thing happened in my district. There was a huge call to revise the educational curriculum, specifically in the history education. We have now a block for civil rights curriculum. They blocked it off, but it's been, now we're on year 9 and there hasn't been a single piece of text brought forward. And then and every single year it's the same thing. It's just that people complain and complain and complain, but then they never show up to the Board of Education meetings. So then when they have to approve curriculums and approve like changes in curriculum, nobody is there to advocate against it. So it's like some of these boards of eds have their hands tied, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Has been politicized as well. Like if any any attempt at fixing this issue is being turned into like a vote generator for one party or another, right? Like it's just
Yeah,
one party
and I mean
specifically.
like in there is a definitely politicization. There's also dumb fucks like the More Perfect Union who's like, well, I've never known the textbooks. Name a textbook. Like, you dumb fuck. This is why there's editions. Like, are we really gonna like die on this hill that schools aren't teaching from the same pieces of text? This is what it looks like, right? Like, you'll have multiple editions of the same text, and a lot of times it's not really updates of the text itself. It's updates of the pictures, maybe some changes of language here and there, but in terms of the curriculum that's in these textbooks, it's largely consistent. And there's various communities that are tasked to look at these changes of editions to make sure that the revisions aren't just sort of like image based and just like moderate, like re-updating of only pictures, but also just certain types of footage and citations. It's really bad. And for some reason, like every time I mention that these books are basically the same that they've been from edition 1 to edition 12, there's always some dumb fuck that pushes back on that. So it's like, I don't know anymore, man. Like,
yeah.
Did you want to say
It's
something?
kind of weird.
Go ahead, please.
Can you guys hear me?
No, we can. I just wasn't sure if you were saying something, but please go ahead, please.
I feel like to like what Joe said, people in my school actually were trying to like, we kind of like spoke out as the little sector inside of our school. So I'm in like the whole AP shits or whatever, and like a whole IB, and we were really like questioning the teachers and really were like pressuring them to like answer the question of why some of these like specific skills are only taught to us, because we're considered like the cream of the top when it comes on to like the education level. And it's like simple concepts that like we feel like everyone should learn. It's like the whole idea of like the whole knowledge systems, for an example, like the fact that we learned that and not everyone else in the school does. And when we sit there and like actively like talk to the other like classes who are like in other sectors of our high school, they actually understand the concept. They're just not like eligible into the program. And it's like so fucked. Like to like go deep into it, but like wholeheartedly, like some concepts should be regularly available to everyone instead of like having it as like the whole smart people versus dumb people bullshit. Just so stupid.
And something else which is kind of unrelated, it was talked about earlier, and I kind of want to push back on this, is that one of the things that's a problem with education curriculum, specifically in the United States, when it comes to teaching like new educators, is that there's so much required to be a teacher that there's a lot of corners that are being cut. So what ends up happening is that you might have certain types of classroom behavioral courses, but those classroom behavioral courses aren't really updated in such a way to have a better acknowledgement of Black people, of Indigenous people, of people of color. And then what happens is you get kids, like, because they are children, like a lot of these educators who end up they're fresh out of like not that far away from high school, like 21, 22, 23. That's not that far away. And they are put into situations with people very close to age in them. And a lot of times they freeze up. I've seen this firsthand, where you'll get like someone who's in field observation. They might do something as Katarana described, and either the teacher observing the student might freeze up because the cooperating teacher system in certain states needs vast revisions, or it's just never really addressed in reports, when what should happen, and music education, I'll give a pat on the back where we do a good job at this, is where we make sure that the teachers who the educators we're trying to create understand these differences of people, understand these differences of how people learn and how they interact. But we're also a profession that requires active learning and active thinkers. Like we can't fall under the show and tell trap, where in things like mathematics, education, science, STEM, very generally, like you can have this sort of show and tell, master slave narrative, and the idea that you just get pushed knowledge and regurgitated. But the one thing that I think educators ought to do from a pedagogical standpoint is for producing educators for history, there has to be an understanding that like teaching is performance, period. Like on top of like being able to teach your craft, you also are performing in front of an audience every day. And the only way you can keep that audience engaged is through performativism. And unfortunately, that's not really expressed, because they think that like performing in education is only exists for like the choirs and the bands. But in reality, like every like public speaking is performance, and that's something that can be done better. But that's another like side topic.
Yeah, I literally dropped out of college because of I couldn't get through the 3-hour lectures every damn day. Like it was like you just sit in there, just having information shoved into your face, and you can't really engage with it.
I mean, I think you brought this up earlier, Chris Cosmo, but like, yeah, it's one of the reasons why, like, history podcasts and shit like that are becoming a big deal. Like, can't sit through the 3-hour boring ass lecture, but Dan Carlin or someone else is gonna make that shit sound interesting as fuck, and you won't even realize that it's been 8 hours of this dude's podcast talking about like Genghis Khan and their lineage, and you've been enthralled since since sentence one.
The
Oh my
question,
God.
That's a
the question
problem in
God.
oh,
itself,
okay,
though.
Let me give you a joke. So I took World History Modern, which is fucked, but I took World History Modern. And what happened is that my teacher was teaching the curriculum, and it goes from the end of the Roman Empire to now, right? And what happened is that we were pre-colonialism, like everything before colonialism, right? European colonialism. Everybody was so engaged, but as soon as we started to get on the topic of colonialism, literally everyone started to fail because they weren't engaged inside of the topic anymore. Like we were learning about the fucking, what is it called? The I don't want to say what is it called? They're like the concubines in the fucking, I forgot what empire it was, but they started to like have basically like kind of like a monopoly on like the power because of how influential they were towards like the sultans. Like we were learning a whole bunch of drama shits, and everyone was so fucking engaged, and we were always talking about it outside of class. But as soon as we got to colonialism, everyone was like, bro, I hate fucking history, bro. Like I don't want to be in this class no more. Like some of the things are so repetitive, bro. Like we have to kind of change the how we interact with stuff like that, because it's going to be repetitive because of it's our country, but at the same exact time actually change of like what you're learning. Like I don't need to learn like the 3 cash crops like every single year. Like I don't need to learn these little things where you're supposed to already know.
well,
And actually
there's something
that's
to
how
yeah.
notes should be taken too.
hmm
Quick tip.
There's something to be said even from the topic prime, like the prime topic here, which is that if we were to strip this down of all of its weight, there's a teacher who wanted to do a more proactive activity so that their students wanted to be more like just active learners and being more hands-on on the material that they're talking about. Unfortunately, when you're having conversations about slavery, about Jim Crow, about the Middle Passage, about all these things, and even the Afro pessimism within that, you can't. There's a lot of understanding that there's just certain things that you have to keep in a discussion format, and then there's certain things that you can immerse yourself in, like something that you could do as an educator is maybe explore the differences in food from individuals who lived during Reconstruction. You could talk about like the changes of clothing and how clothing was produced. You can talk about how farms were cultivated. And going to the topic about cotton specifically, right? If you want to go that way, like talk about the changes of like how these things were produced in terms of speed and something, and you don't have to even do it in like a weird hyperbolic way, not hyperbolic, excuse me, in a weird sort of way where you like have kids sort of clean cotton, like something that I did when I was in, I think it was high school, where when we were talking about the advancements within the Industrial Revolution and within Reconstruction specifically, my teacher put a timer on, and basically he had a timer adjusted for the amount that an average worker would produce sugar, and then I forget what the machine is called, but then what it was done through machines, and then like the timer just showed throughout the class, like we saw in real time, like how I don't want to say beneficial, but it is beneficial. Like the changes, like going away from manpower to machine power, and like this
Yeah,
is one of the like
we
stuff
did
like
that for
that.
middle school for me.
Yeah,
We
like there are
did
ways to do
middle
this
school. We
that
did
are
different crops.
yeah, or even just showing how like something else that you can do, like going to a historical museum and showing how these type of machinery works. Like these are things that you can do with that. But then the question is like, what's the goal when you're teaching this within your curriculum? And
Yeah.
that's something that teachers, unfortunately, because sometimes they don't get a lot of feedback from the supervisors, they don't really have a chance, so they kind of have to roll the dice.
I want to piggyback off of what Princess was saying about how boring learning about colonialism was growing up, and like how repetitive it was. there's so much I already know about like American history and colonialism because it was beat into my head, but at the same time it was never enjoyable. I never really got the context of everything. But like recently, last year I started like watching those oversimplified videos on YouTube, and like they gave me the same information, yet I was infinitely more entertained when watching it, right? Not only gave you the same information, they gave you actually more information within a shorter period of time. And like there is like ways to do that, and really creative ways to do that. It's just that we've been stuck teaching things for like the same way for so many years that like every time the topic comes up, even though there's new information to learn about that topic, we're still learning it in the exact same way. So it still feels
Yeah,
boring as we
definitely.
get.
That's not the point of school. The point of school is not for you to have fun. It's jail for kids. Every single thing that you learn in university, a lot of us end up leaving university, or sorry, a lot of us end up leaving school, like secondary school, only liking one particular subject because that we're only, I guess, kind of destined to go on and do that one particular thing. But everything else, you end up leaving and hating it. Like, even though I personally, like in my own time, may love to read books, and that's all I would do in high school. When I got to English literature, I wanted to, commit Minecraft every day. Like, it's just you're not supposed to like it. That's not the incentive structure to give you.
I don't know if that's necessarily
School is
true. Like, is it
jail?
that you're not necessarily supposed to like it, or
No,
is it just
like,
that like that's how it's been for so
No,
long,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, fundamentally, like, yes,
It's
you're supposed
jail?
to enjoy things, but like when it comes to all these different types of subjects, the way that I guess they've incentivized teaching is like so much along the lines of standardization and only teaching the things that like you need to go ahead and pass the FCAT, or that's what it was for Florida, or whatever standardized thing that like all they give two fucks about is you learning how to do these certain things. And a lot of teachers are just there to get their vacation time, and a lot, like, whenever you get a good teacher, that's enough to make you go ahead and join that field. In my case, I didn't give two shits about physics. I just happened to get a teacher that was really good at teaching it, and I was like, oh, this is my life now.
Just
Like, that this is the problem with, like, I find school as a whole is just it's there's so many people that are there that suck at it, and you just end up like wanting to like not be there majority of the time. So
just
like, it's
for
not just
yeah.
history that's
Okay.
taught like shit. Math is taught like shit. Physics is taught like shit. Biology is taught like shit. It's all just a bunch of crap, and like you're essentially only good at the things that you end up going on and doing for the rest of your life.
So I
I
don't think
mean,
that
math is
people would like. I'm gonna push back on that perspective a little bit. I think that it's very easy to have that take if the education system fails you, but there are teachers who are in these fields who are striving to make the experience better for students and educators at large. I think one of the problems here is, especially in the United States, teachers are incredibly underpaid and incredibly overworked, and it's something that happens in a lot of school districts is that you have whether a turnaround is like a high turnaround of teachers where it's very very difficult for teachers to get tenure, or do you get sort of a part of the problem that you're alluding to, that there isn't a lot of there's plenty of additional education, but there sometimes isn't a lot of time for those teachers to pursue that additional education while they're still teaching. So you'll have Susan, you'll have teachers who only understood like how teaching pedagogy worked in the 80s, and now they're in the 2000s and they have tenure, but they don't have time to pursue these things because they're still underpaid and overworked. So it's like, and how do they supplement that? They give breaks for things like teachers conferences, but that's still all well and good. But as somebody who's been to multiple teachers conferences, it's impossible to, in the time allotted for these things, to actually have a immersive experience in the subject material. It's kind of just like a peppering. It's like, okay, we'll see you next year. Like, I think additional education for educators needs to be explored, because I think will produce better outcomes. But also just paying teachers better wages. That's another thing that you could do for that, and making sure that schools that are left behind because of things like property tax have the federal funds or state funds in order to make sure their facilities are just as good as the top 10 top 5 school down the street.
Um, I wanted to give a little support to Katarana of what you said previously about school being jail. This is known, right? That what was it by grade 9 or something? It's actually not grade 9. Excuse me. Grade 4 when people were like 9 years old. That most kids have lost their excitement for school, for learning. Right? Like this is not a revolutionary concept. That for a lot of kids, like they're really psyched when they're very young, but then it just gets beaten onto them. If you're lucky enough maybe to have a more interactive school, maybe it might have been different for you. But I knew like it was, I going to school sucked. That's what it felt like to me. I would get, for me personally, and this happened like throughout my life, I would get like super excited to go like before like the school started. I would get super excited to go to start my new grade, right, or to start university or to start grad school, right, until I actually got into it. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I hate this. So
yeah, I agree with you. It beats you up. That's why I think that overall, like, there's a lot that we can do. Like there's a lot of steps that schools do, and unfortunately, the more affluent schools get the benefits. Where you'll see that kids who come from more affluent school districts have better opinions from schools and about how schools work than kids who aren't from those type of school districts, and that's unfortunate. Because and then on top of that, that's not to say that affluent schools don't have problems, but there's something to be said about the resources that educators have and just a feeling that educators have about going to work in the first place that definitely changes the outcomes and how just students feel at large. Like if you have a teacher every day that's miserable about their job, that's going to reflect on the student's education level.
I think the reason Gsu Gambit is getting hung up on the term jail is because it's a hyperbolic statement, yes, but like there's some truth to it. As a kid, like 8 to 12 hours a day is like forever. And like the only time you really get to have fun is that you get 15 minutes out on the yard, 15 to 30 minutes out on the yard, and you got to go back into your into your cell to continue your punishment. Like, and you do that like day after day after day, and like you get those little moments of reprieve, and like you have to go back and you get your summer vacation out, and then like you because of that summer vacation you forget the the torment you were in, and so you get excited to go see your friends again and like be around people and and interact, but then you realize that's not really much of what you experience in school. Those moments of interaction like come in between like the hours of like lectures and like homework and projects like you don't care about. So I think this is where Katarina was saying when she was like calling it jail.
Yeah, I'm being hyperbolic, of course, but like there's no other environment for the rest of your life that you need to ask permission to go take a piss. Like,
I mean, like to Katarina's point, like
you do, God damn it.
Listen, like to
go-
Katarina's point, there is like the part about like elementary school where it's like you are literally led from place to place in lines and shit, and they watch over you, kind of like overseers. Like to an extent, you can make that point.
So let's go to
But that
GSU.
happens in-
Let's go
that
to
happens in-
let's go to GSU and Joe. All right, GSU and Joe.
This is so silly to me. Like, we're talking about like when kids are super young and they're like playing on water slides and shit and comparing it to, yes, of course, later in your life, you're going to actually have to learn stuff and you got to sit in classes to learn it. To call it jail or say it is synonymous, it's not even hyperbolic, it's idiotic. Like, of course, you're not going to enjoy school as much when you're learning as when you're running around all damn day sliding down slides. Like, it's silly. It's such a silly point.
No, like the
I
learning
mean,
doesn't have
it's
have
bad
to
enough that we
suck.
literally have terms like school to prison pipeline for a reason. Like this is like not even just a metaphorical statement. This is also kind of a literal one, right? There are direct causal mechanisms from our education system that drive people away from it and turn towards crime, and then other failures of our education system and the resources there within that like I mean like they're to say it's silly I think is also kind of ridiculous. Like
Yeah, I don't know. I've done.
I'm not saying it's a
work over the
jail.
last
It's
year.
hyperbolic,
No, it is.
sure,
No,
but
no,
like to say it's
Yeah.
silly and ridiculous, like
No,
No,
it's actually jail.
No,
they walk in lines and they spend 8
Okay.
hours.
Okay, for the love of
Wait,
Christ,
so
I
hold on.
offered
So
I offered two examples. I was not being serious. Yes, it's a hyperbolic statement. Everyone
Yeah.
here knows that
No, it's
schools
not
aren't
hyperbolic.
jail.
right. But I know,
It's
like,
not
for me as
hyperbolic.
a teacher, right? Like, it's just poor rhetoric for me to say that schools are equivalent to prisons. Now, there are things, as Eprince laid out, that there are certain types of consequences when you have things like over policing in schools, which lead to the type of environment that might feel like a jail setting for students, and that's something that you have to recognize. Now, something else here, which I'm kind of curious about, if this is directly to Katarana, what, like, well, it's not really a question, it's just a few points. Like, there is the acknowledgement that there are certain practices that have sort of like the master slave tradition, and a lot of it's been abolished. As an example, when I went to I can only speak for my district here, and I'm sure everybody has different experiences with this, but the bathroom policies essentially get abolished after you hit middle school, where a lot of times they do either sort of like sign in, sign out sort of things, or other types of levels of just making sure the students are accounted for. Because something that gets
Probably
abolished,
was your school, but I'm gonna tell you, until the day I turned 18, I had to tell people what time and how long I was gonna go take a piss or shit for.
yes, because there's
Yep.
an understanding that the teachers are accountable for the students that are there. I've had students in my district who've used the very system that you described to leave school. And then what
Okay,
happens is those teachers
I'm
get
telling you where
fired.
I went to school.
I'm quite not finished here. So we have to understand, like, okay, our experience might be some way, but then what can be done to make the experience better for students and teachers? One of the things that my school found were a few types of policy prescriptions, which I think everybody will be on board with. The idea of asking to go to the bathroom doesn't exist within my school district. If you have to go to the restroom, you go to the restroom. We also have security, sure, and the security guards also have good relationships with the student body, mainly because one of the parts of their job is involving themselves within the community. These are people that be respected. Now that's like not really necessarily a policy prescription, but something that officers in schools have to recognize, that they are responsible for these students, and you have to treat these students like human beings, which is something in a lot more stricter quote unquote school districts doesn't exist. But there's a lot of things that have sort of jail-like features, like designated lunch hours, like where you have to be. My school district doesn't have that. You can eat lunch anywhere in the school during lunch hour, and lunch hour is universal, so everyone has lunch at the exact same time. You can have certain things, like I mentioned, the accountability of like signing in, signing out, that doesn't exist. If you need to go to the bathroom, you can go to the bathroom. If there's a specific teacher that you need to go to, then there's a pass system, and the pass system is very, very simple, that hasn't really been broken or abused. But there are ways to change the environment. So I guess my question is, like, what are some environmental changes that you think would be sufficient in order to have it not feel like a jail system to you, or to even like approach that level of hyperbolic statement?
I don't know. Like, honestly, just because your school has a certain policy and like there might be a utility for your district,
That's why
I
I'm
can tell
asking
you.
you about what are certain things that you would want to see in order for it to maybe move away from that, so you wouldn't like use the hyperbolic language of calling schools jail. That's my
Mhm.
question for you.
Can I answer
Well,
the question?
we'll let Katarana give
Sure,
it
but
a
yeah,
crack, and then we'll go to you, Pink.
yeah. Just to give like quickly for I understand why yours did it, but like when I went to school in a different country, literally we cannot leave school. Like there's nowhere to go. Like unless I want to leave the gates of my school and get kidnapped, there's nowhere for me to go. But they still had the bathroom passes, so it is
So
literally
but he's
just
asking you, what do you want? Like,
What would
yeah,
you
yeah. I
what would
just
you
wanted to
want
give.
to change the
I
Yes.
just want to explain that.
yeah,
Like
okay.
there's still a purpose. Like they do it just to do it. As for, can I give a prescription? Not off the cusp. Was it? We typically don't talk about policy here. We just usually argue into the abyss. But I can think about one and come back to you. But it just because yours the system happens to be better just sounds like congrats, you got the Nordic model. Doesn't change the fact that some of us still see it as a prison environment. And like as somebody that does a lot of work with people that are currently incarcerated, that's why a lot of times I come and promote like the Black Legal Action Fund. I can tell you that like several prisoners I speak to very much make the the comparison of saying it is similar to prison. So
Right. So
that
I'm
could be-
asking. So I guess like my plea to you here is just give some prescriptions and prescriptions of thought, because that's how we can create these kind of changes. And you have advocacy groups that you advocate for, so you understand that like one of the things about that is policy. So being able to come with these conversations with policy prescriptions is incredibly important. No, like we can acknowledge that, right? Like if I want to, I can argue and call
I
people.
mean, just like off the cusp, I usually don't really. I'm not a big fan of just talking out of my ass, and since it's not something that I particularly dedicate time to, is school abolition or different
Well, it's
ways to go ahead and like do this. Like I'm just not a big fan of thinking of things just off the cusp, because I need to think about the actual
It's killing
way
me.
in which
It's off the cuff, like sleep cuff. It's off the cuff.
Thank you. Have a nice.
Cuff. Joe Lewis, you can respond quickly, then we'll go to Bink Princess.
No. I just think that it's very well. I think it's important to identify the problems, and I think something that we've done here is done a good job about identifying the problems, and that's why I'm just pilled on it. Where I think that like something that we can do is just have a better conversations around like, okay, what are the things that we can do to try to change these things? Like I can acknowledge that there is a problem within my school district, that over 90% of my students who are Black have more than 4 suspensions, like out of school suspensions on their record. This is a student body of less than 30 students. So like I understand that that's a statistical fact, but then the question is like I can complain about that all I want, but then it's like, okay, what can be done to change that? That's why it's like you don't have to look into it, but like something that you can say is like, well, maybe like looking into the patterns. I'm just using this example and then we can move on. Like looking at the patterns of like why these students are suspended, trying to figure out, okay, are these patterns like compared to their white counterparts? Like if you do them side to side, are they the same? Like there's ways to approach these problems. And again, like I just think that it's very easy for us to complain about problems without any type of solutions. But I think that like one of the problems within all these spaces online is that we don't talk more about solutions. That's kind of why I'm like asking for something.
Let's go to Bink Princess. Wants to answer that, and then I guess Pyro, and we might move on after that because yeah.
If I may answer that question, I would say one thing we could stop doing is like acting like a principal ruling with an iron fist is okay. I've had like plenty of principals that will come and go and will be like, well, basically having the idea or rhetoric that like I'm going to whip this school into shape and all the kids will be like, I don't know, it just sounds really like terrible to me that like ruling school with like and strict and iron fist is like a normalized concept from what
using
I
the principle as like a threat.
Yeah, I don't think that's healthy.
Go ahead, Pyro.
So, like, to answer your question, Joe, because like hearing about some of the things your district did, like I can name a few, because like I'm in agreement with Katarana based on the schools I went to, and a few suggestions and prescriptive statements I'd say offhand is like, yo, you guys didn't have that whole bathroom pass sign out shit. I can say right now, up until like 11th grade, you had to sign a list and then wait to go to the bathroom, and then when the teacher decided you got to go to the bathroom, then you got to go to the bathroom. I remember very specifically one kid just losing his shit, and when the teacher was like, "Where do you think you're going?" He's like, "I'm not no fucking pea pot. I have to go piss." Went to the bathroom and then got like suspended for 2 days. I think that's a big one. Another issue for my district, at least, is like, I understand dress code to a certain extent, but if you're gonna like literally call me down because I have something you don't agree with written on my shirt, I think that's a fucked up thing. I think like some of like how strict they go with the rules and shit make it feel more like a prison versus it actually being like it. Cause like when the teachers and shit come down with that iron fist, it does kind of feel like, it's drill sergeant Mr. Cole, or, instead of just like, your math teacher. Cause then they come down and they use that little bit of power for everything it's worth.
Yeah, we had a senior last year where she had a crop top, and it was just like I wasn't there in school when this dropped down, but apparently like she was just bearing it all. And we don't have a dress code policy. It's basically like if the teacher or somebody in the individual feels that it's distracting from the educational process, then you can file like a complaint, and then it's like sort of like just on a case by case basis. Long story short, she ended up getting suspended for a week because during the interaction with the administration, she didn't want to wear her gym clothes because she's like, I already had gym. things are sweaty. I'm not gonna wear my gym clothes all day just because of like I want to do that. And then they were just like, okay, well, we can like call a parent and send you home. It's like, well, I don't have a parent, so it's like sometimes like there's a level of empathy that you have to do for certain students where it's like, especially for dress code, where it's like, I think it's on the school to have a solution to the problem instead of always like pitting the solution to the student, because sometimes students don't have solutions to the problems that happen to them, and that's totally understandable. Because like I think for you, Pyro, right, like if you were in a situation where you brought in and said like we find your shirt inappropriate, like could you wear like the school shirt, like we can get you a size and whatever you want, like I feel like that'll be a much better outcome than being like change your shirt or else. You know what I'm saying? Like
Oh, like
that's not
there's
the
been
best solution, by the
instances.
way.
No, like there's been instances where, like in the middle of a fucking blizzard in upstate New York, they've told me like, "Hey, go walk back home because we don't like the type of coat you're wearing." I'm a person who likes me a a nice trench coat. I think they look snazzy.
True.
But like they just told me outright, like, go home and put on another coat because we not allowing you in the building. And unironically had a principal say this: "You look like Columbine." And I'm like, what? They're like, you look like Columbine. You need to go change because like we're already tightening security and shit, because of everything going on in the country. I'm like, dude, it's like 20 degrees.
It was the coats that killed them.
Boss
That's what
worked at
killed the
Columbine
kids.
during the shooting.
Yeah, it was my
just, like,
tan
fucking
fishing
insane.
overcoat that killed them, not like anything else.
Empress, you want? Well, let's get last word, and we'll move on to the next subject.
I was just saying, like that comment that was just made. That's insane to me. I had a boss that worked she was an art teacher at Columbine High School around the time of the shooting. She was late that day because her daughter was the only reason she wasn't there. And like that's just she would lose her shit if she heard that.
Yeah.
So okay. Well, thanks for that. We got a lot more out of that than I thought we would, actually. I thought that was actually going to be a really quick one. So thank you for participating. And to my audience, we're going to continue on to our next topic. But as a reminder, as we've been doing throughout the week, letting you know that tomorrow, we will have our first event with the Be a Hero campaign. And we're going to be organizing for Medicare for All. So Joe out here is talking about solutions. Well, we're doing solutions, right? We're doing praxis out here. So we are going to hold that organizing event. We will have individuals coming through talking about their stories, right? So we're gonna have a closed panel like this, right? And our good friend Empress is going to be on there. We're super excited to have them. Hey. And then after that, we're going to go over to their Discord server, and we'll be using the new stage feature within Discord, right? An audio only feature, and you can also join in, right? So it's kind of like an open panel. You can join in, but you don't have to have your camera on. It'll just be audio only if you want to share a story about how your interactions with the American healthcare system, and that'll be a perfect time to do so. We want to hear from you, right? So if you've gone through something, if a family member has gone through something, or anything like that, you want to be a part of this, we'd love to have you. So that's tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's gonna be our first event. We hopefully will continue this partnership and do some practice, do some actual organizing here, and have some sort of real world effect. So I hope that's like the future of Twitch politics, is that we're actually doing these types of events, trying to organize, trying to make a difference rather than just argue. I do enjoy the arguing, though. That part's my favorite. But we can also do more. So, okay. Just want to let you guys know. Oh, also, I have the tweet. Yeah, I'm going to do that real quick. I'm putting this in chat. This is the tweet that I did earlier today. If you guys would be so kind as to share it, like, retweet it or whatever, just like and stuff. Look, I don't fucking use Twitter, all right? Get off my ass, all right? So just go to hit that link, and get the message out there that we're doing this, trying to make this as big as possible, but we need your help, especially for the participation part in the second half. We need your help. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, be there. Okay. So what are we doing next? Oh yeah, next topic. Topic 2. And I forgot to write this in, but this topic is thanks to our good friend Gsu Gambit. He presented it to me, and first of all, I love that. Please give me more topics. That's great. I love it. I love it. But he was so kind as to present this one. I thought it was interesting. It's something we've talked about before on Lily, right? On Amazon Lily, but we usually don't talk about these type of topics here. So I'm really interested in what you all have to say. The rapper Lil Yachty, and I'm first. This is my first time hearing this person. Come on. Anyway, whatever. Shut up. The rapper Lil Yachty has come out with a nail polish brand for men. This isn't the only company that's targeting men with makeup that has been traditionally worn by women. Is this just expanding gender norms, or is this an attack on masculinity? Should men wear these things? Have we progressed enough as a society to where these things should matter? Would you be okay with your son wearing makeup? Right.
Prime, I'm finna eat, so thank you for having me.
Okay.
I
Thank
work
you.
out, so later, guys.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So for the rest of you, let's go with Joe Lewis.
Nail polish is gender neutral. These things are fine. If you want to wear makeup, wear makeup. If you want to wear nail polish, wear nail polish. I don't know why people want to die on the hill. It's a little weird, but I don't know. I don't listen. Like, my child is my child. They told me they wanted to put makeup and nail polish on. Cool, we'll go to Sephora, I guess. Like, I don't know these places. My girlfriend knows these places, so I guess we'll fucking go to these things. But like, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at on this. Like, I'm cool with it. I think most people generally, I would think, are cool with it. Maybe like, I don't know. Maybe if you believe cultural Marxism was real, then maybe you're against it. I don't know the take. I wish I had a better perspective on it. It just seems fine. Like, it just seems very fine, and weak men have weak takes. So I mean, like, if you like, I hope like your vaccination doesn't make you gay, but I don't know what to tell you. It's fine. I'm with it.
Thank you, Coppermine Colas, for the $5 donation. Very, very much appreciate it. Thank you for investing in this community. All right, let's go to Matt Latin.
I think folks can do what they want as far as making sure that their kids are happy and content. And if their sons want to wear makeup, like I've seen it happen. I had a chess student who surprised me on a Zoom call the other day, like, full blown makeup, and I was like, oh, all right. And we continued our lesson, everything was normal. Like, I didn't treat it any differently. So my immediate response, viscerally, is like, it's completely fine. And I think, like, logically, I don't see any reason to do anything about this. Also, fun fact: nail polish is great for fixing broken nails. Like, if you have a crack down your thumbnail, I've definitely used nail polish to keep my nail held together while it all healed. So, like, I don't think there's anything bad about using it as a resource or as a fashion, like, whatever.
Colorado.
So I have one problem with this, and the problem is that it's called nail polish for men. Pretty stupid. This is like, when they have like pink razors, and then there's like, this is now the girl's razor. Like, this is really dumb. Like, is it the same color? Does it do the same shit? Does it still make your nails blue or pink or whatever? That I don't know. It's just, I think it's kind of dumb that it had to be like a nail polish brand for men. Like, just use the other ones. I understand it's because Lil Yachty hasn't made any bangers lately, and he's trying to make 50 cents. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of weird. But overall, no, I don't give two fucks if men are wearing nail polish. Hassan's been wearing nail polish lately. It looks very nice. And I think I've seen quite a few like men on YouTube that wear makeup to go ahead and cover up their acne. And even if it wasn't for that pure utilitarian purpose, it's fine. Like, I don't wear makeup, and some other women don't, and that's cool. Some women do, that's cool. Some men do, that's cool. Some men don't, that's cool. Like, all these things are just arbitrary, like randomly assigned through a slot machine gender norms, and I don't give a fuck who's doing what. As long as you're not killing people, do you?
Is this little Yachty person big? I really never heard of him.
He's the king of the kids.
Yes.
He was.
Massive.
King-
Look, I haven't heard him since the song Broccoli. So
King of the kids?
he doesn't.
He's
Yeah, they call him the
really
king of the
big.
kids.
Okay.
Wait, is there a joke here that I'm missing?
Yeah, I don't
No,
know.
they just call him the king of the kids.
And Prime, I'm with
Okay.
you. I don't know what the hell little Yachty is either.
All right, so I understand it sounds
don't wanna
weird,
know.
right? Right? Like if I said Matt Gates was the king of the kids, you'd be like, wait, what? But generally speaking, it's just that like kids kids mainly like individuals between the ages of like 10 to 14 tend to really think his music's a bop. I mean it's
Yeah.
catchy, I guess, but ain't no J. Cole.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
It's me. I'm out of it. So, all right. Anyway,
He's uber famous for sure.
Pyro.
Just
So I want to just like answer these questions. Is this expanding gender norms? Yeah. Is this an attack on masculinity? It's only an attack on your masculinity if you're such a punk that a little bit of fancy nail paint makes you feel threatened. This ain't a big deal. Like, one, I'm just gonna say it. Dudes in makeup, yeah, okay, I can get with that. Like, fucking beautiful. Everyone can look beautiful with fucking makeup or whatever have you and shit. Like, it's not really gendered. It shouldn't be. Like, would I let my son wear makeup? Why the fuck not? I legit see no reason why the fuck not. If it makes the kid feel happy and I'm not forcing them to do it, why not? Have we progressed enough as a society where these things shouldn't matter? I would say hopefully we have, but apparently we haven't because like there's news articles and TMZ articles about this like, oh my god, this isn't a breaking news story. He came out with like a poor attempt to make money like Katarana said. It's not that big a deal.
Thanks so much, Empress.
In this good Catholic household, we won't have no boys putting on no makeup. And if they put on that makeup, we're going to pull out the holy water to burn the gay away. No, of course. I'm a trans one of color. Of course I'm letting my son wear makeup. If daughter and me, I don't give a shit, right? Who am I to judge, especially, well, being me? I'm not really that huge into makeup myself. I never have been. For me, it's more of a comfort thing that I might do every once in a while, or if I really want to look fancy. I do really like nail polish. I don't always do it just because it's a pain in the ass to do. Of course, these things aren't in and of themselves gendered. We, as a society, made them gendered, right? And how did that happen? And that gets into where I have a problem with this story, which is very similar story to what we saw with children's toys, right? And you see this in many different markets, right? Where you segment the market based on gender in order to increase profit margins. If you actually look at a lot of the ingredients used in these men's products, it's not just little, I don't know anything about Lil Yachty's nail polish. I don't particularly care. I do not want to listen to more of his music than I already have. But this is a marketing move, right? I've actually talked with John Burke about this. He targets veterans and Hispanic men with a lot of his products and advertisements because they're the most likely to buy his kinds of products, according to his market research, right? And if you segment the market, like I said, you increase profitability. You're able to get those people to pay a higher premium for your product. But if you actually, like I said, if you look at the ingredients on these products, they're not very high quality products. They know what they're doing. They're selling shit products to men who don't know any better, right? And trying to make a good profit doing so, partially because men are extremely brand loyal. So yeah, it's all bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors, guys. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for the capitalism.
Chris Cosmo.
Yeah. This isn't attack on masculinity. It's attack on, I guess, a certain type of masculinity, the popularization of men in war. I think we can see throughout history that like men wearing makeup was a thing, right? It used to be commonplace, and nobody really cared about it. It's only through like long, like especially with America, long stints of of war and like eras of war and popularizing like uh, men in war, where they have these strict ways of dress, like this rigid attire, like you have to stick to this thing, and like when you want to influence more men to get into, you know, join the corps, join your military, you popularize those things, you make those things seem like they're cool, so those things get like they become normal, and like through times in history where people are rebelling against those things, you start to notice, like when it came to the hippies or the goths, they started to rebel against that. They started growing their hair out, wearing more colors, being more flamboyant, right? They are rejecting this whole image of what the military projects, which is this rigid, stern man of what a man should be, the ultimate man, right? And now we're getting to this point where a lot of people are again rejecting that image, and they don't necessarily know that's the image they're rejecting, but it is. And like have always been men have always been wearing nail polish. If you go back to the 80s with punks and like goths, they were wearing nail polish, right? And they were rejecting it at that time. And it wasn't an attack on masculinity. A lot of them were super masculine. It was just like a rejection of that image. So I think this isn't anything new. This is pretty normal. It's just now we have mainstream artists pushing it. We have a mainstream rapper pushing this image. And Lil Yachty's been known to do this. So I think one of his albums, I think it was Youth or something like that, where he had two gay kids kissing on the front of the front of the album. For a rap album, that's something like that was something unheard of at the time, and it was talked about a lot. So I think like this is what Lil Yachty does. He's been doing this. It's just now I think like we haven't heard it. Like Lil Yachty's been missing for a couple of years. Like we haven't really heard him doing anything, and I think people just jumped on this because they're like scared. We're in this era where we're scared of what feminism and these new ideas of gender are doing to people. So like people pull up anything to fearmonger and get people scared again. Like what's happening to masculinity, or will there no longer be any men? Like that's just what people have in their heads. So I think it's just stupid. Yeah, and it's a good thing. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Gsu Gambit.
Yeah, so yeah, this is nonsense. It's the continued emasculation, definitely a black man being pushed by uh our white media owners. It's absolutely stupid. What was the three questions? Is it expanding gender norms to attack? So a part of what expanding gender norms is an attack on traditional masculinity or femininity. Explain why these things? No, I don't think so personally. Have we progressed enough as a society where these things shouldn't matter? Would you be okay with your son wearing makeup? I'm not okay with my daughter wearing makeup at the age that she is, so I definitely wouldn't be okay with my son either. Yeah, so I think these are just continued emasculation of definitely black people, but
So you'd be
masculinity
a
as a
problem
whole.
with your son as an adult. So it's just like forget the kids. Like as an adult, your adult son.
Oh yeah, when somebody's an adult, I think that at that point they have control over their lives and they can do whatever they want. Not before it, absolutely not. But I don't think that my personal opinion on what an adult should do should matter to their personal life.
Okay.
What is it about?
But would you let your daughter wear makeup before she's 18?
I don't, that's a good question. I really don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know. I think I'll figure these things out as my daughter gets older, but as it is right now, I honestly have no clue.
But they're like, you see them the same way, or do you see them differently out of curiosity as a parent?
No, I definitely see my daughter and my son differently, right? I believe in masculinity. and
Specifically like this thing,
femininity.
obviously, right? As a parent, you know that the
Yeah.
real world issues are going to be very different. My father, for example, flat out says that he treats my sister and me differently,
Yeah,
despite,
for
I mean,
sure.
obviously for most
Yeah.
of my life I was
I,
male, right? But I mean, like on this specific issue, do you think there's a difference?
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like I said, I agree. I agree a lot with gender norms or whatever words we want to use to encapsulate this. So yeah, I have a different relationship with my son and my daughter, and I would expect different behavior of them. Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
What this
You're on
reminds
mute.
me of,
No, who's on
oh,
mute?
Oh, I thought Empress was saying something.
no, what this reminds me of is like growing up, like I was into a lot of like different things, and like my younger brother, he was dyeing his hair like back in like the early 2000s, and like because of the things that we were doing and we were expressing, or like we were having fun with, like you get other family members like thinking like, oh, they're gay, they have to be gay, right? You get those comments constantly, right? Get people thinking you're weird or wanting to exclude you from things, or just not wanting to be around you because like they think there's something wrong with you rather than you just having fun as a kid, and then not like generally having to extend to anything like sexual. You just like look at my background. I love colors and like brightness and boldness, right? It's exciting to me. I'm a visual person, so if I want to like wear like nail polish and stuff, it's not because I want to emulate what a woman like looks like. It's like I want more color on me. I want more brightness, more boldness, and like people can't contextualize those things. They can't really think of those things outside of these gender norms that we like been pushing like for so many years. We like put we have these strict bonds of what we should be as people, especially in kids. When as a kid, that's when you're most curious, right? That's when you're most like wanting to explore, and that's how you really find out who like you become the person you are, right? Through those years of growing and learning and expressing, you finally get up to the person like you become. And a lot of people, it is when you're stunted and like you have to wait until you're like 18 or 30 before you actually get to express yourself. It can be very psychologically damaging in a lot of ways. So I think we should stop like doing that. We should like encourage kids to explore themselves more, explore the things that they like more, and be okay with it. And like only have push back on it when it becomes like dangerous or toxic, right? That's the only time. That not when like your kid wants to wear like blue nail polish. Someone wants to wear blue nail polish because they like the color blue and they want more blue on them, so they like dye their hair blue and have blue nail polish. And you think like, no, you can't do that because you're a kid. The kids have to listen to adults. But why? What is that? What is having more blue on you like doing to you? And like in the real world, what negatives is that bringing? That's all. Yeah.
That's a
Wait,
question.
I
No,
I
go
I
ahead.
have to ask, TSD, are you kidding? Like, are you memeing, or do you actually think that there's a problem with
I
men
I
wearing,
don't think I don't think I'm memeing at all.
like, is this like to see if we can get back on the top of like LSF, or like I'm just like I'm a little bit kerfuffled.
Wait,
Like, do you actually have a
okay.
problem
So
with like
you don't
guys
have to
wearing nail
be
polish?
you don't have to be confused, right? The statements that I make, I make them in confidence. So what's your question? I don't get this whole, hey, are you for real? Did you mean that? Like, yes, I meant the words that came out of my mouth. What's your
Okay, so
question though? I
yeah,
think
so
that's more
just like
important.
so I can properly like I don't want to missummarize because I didn't write it down. So you think that it's like attack on masculinity to allow that like these brands are going ahead and targeting men, or like is it the like what exactly is your
Yeah,
issue with?
I think using the king of youth to do these type of things are continued coordinated attacks against masculinity. You want me to regurgitate what I said earlier? I don't.
Okay,
What's your
so
question? What's your actual
okay,
question?
okay, so who's attacking masculinity? Like, who's coordinating the attacks on masculinity, and like,
I
why is nail polish an
I
attack in
I would
itself?
say I would say the um I would say what white media owns, the people who are behind these types of things financially, right? It's the same thing with like what's his name? Shit. I can't think of his name right now. Joe, you probably know his name. Young Thug. Like it's just like Young Thug coming out with dresses for boys and things like this, right? These things
Shout out to
are
Atlanta.
yeah. These things
Okay,
are coordinated. These things aren't in isolation, I don't think. And it is absolutely attack on masculinity.
But if you think about it, like rap is the most hip hop is like in rap or has become the most popular genre. What is going to influence black kids is also going to influence these white kids, right?
I didn't say
And
it wouldn't.
no,
I said that in my opening, actually.
yeah, but also, like you're not going to like if a kid doesn't like that and it's not they're not into that, they're not going to like do that. But like there's something in you that like when you see something and it speaks to you and you're like I
You
like that. I want
you don't
I
you don't
like
think
that.
kids are impressionable?
Yeah,
That's your
but not
argument? Your argument is that kids are so founded in their beliefs that they aren't impressionable and
not
can't be
100%. You can't
modified by media?
of
I mean,
modified like you like what you like, right? If it's toxic and dangerous, yes, that's when we push back. But if
Well,
like
that's
if
what a person like me that believes in whatever you
what
guys
is
think is masculinity would think.
Well,
what are
masculinity
the
is
okay,
a
so like,
cultural
well,
construct, right? Like we
but
get
like
to decide.
I didn't
this
say
just
it
kind
wasn't a construct. Like
no,
what is this?
so
Yeah,
like
what what about Young Thug wearing a dress is dangerous? What
That's
about
the
that is
question.
dangerous?
I
That's the
didn't say
question that
dang.
like I wanted
Wait,
to hit on because
yeah, I
Katarana
didn't.
like almost asked it. Like,
So,
what
so
about these things are attacks on masculinity? What about
I
nail
kinda,
polish is an attack on masculinity for you? Like,
I
what part of
kinda,
wearing nail polish
okay,
is the
I
attack for you?
kind of
okay.
understand the
Let me boil
perspective.
this down really easily for y'all. Whatever you would consider traditional masculinity, would you say that that thought would embrace men wearing dresses and nail polish? Because all of
Okay,
y'all said in
wait.
y'all opening that it wouldn't, right? So
Okay,
obviously
really
the answer is yes.
quickly.
No,
Is this a
specifically,
bad
I
thing
said in
though?
my
Like within your, if this
No,
is
I don't think he's
attacking
acting. I
masculinity,
think
is
he's
that a
being
bad thing?
serious. But the real attack on masculinity is when the men will cry from the acetone fumes when they're taking it off. That's when the attack on masculinity happens. I'm not sure.
but like
It seems like the gendered association with these things is social, right? Like,
Yes,
yeah,
of
like
course.
it's
I'm
not
not.
damaging to someone's masculinity to wear nail polish. When I was a man, I was a
Yeah,
pretty manly fucking man. I was 190,
wait, Empress,
6'3", right? I would
Empress.
fucking like take any bitch that tried to cut me or tried to fight with me, right? I wore nail polish, right?
Wait, Empress.
I
I
mean,
think
like
this is
gender
easy.
nonconformity isn't emasculation.
So
I
I think
hold on. Let
so.
me.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
curious, Gambit. I'm trying so hard. I'm also trying to build a roller coaster. So you're saying, so just so I'm kind of understanding this perspective, because I've heard it kind of replicate in other spaces.
Mhm.
I think is your issue the people who are projecting the messaging? Does that make sense? Like, if I don't know how to word this thought, and it might come out yikes. I'm gonna
Wait,
try very
but
hard. Okay.
Yeah.
quickly before you ask, can I still get my question answered?
Sure.
Because
Go ahead.
I think that'll.
Dragon first. All right. I
Wait,
got you.
3 people
Yeah.
later? Okay. All right. Yeah.
I
What's
just
the
need to
question?
know: is it a bad thing? Because I know some people say yes, it's attack on masculinity, and like that's fine.
Yes,
But
to a
or
person. Yes, to a
yeah,
person like me who is okay with traditional gender roles, I see it as a bad thing. I thought I made
uh,
that clear
uh,
in my opening.
okay. There's a you can be okay with traditional gender roles, but also say, but I'm okay with people doing it whatever they want. Like I
Well,
don't
I'm
want
okay
to.
with. Okay.
Yeah, but you see it as a negative that
Yeah.
men are
Okay. So
being marketed
yeah,
to in this way.
I can try to answer this. So there are certain things, such as men being more willing to talk about emotion. There are certain things that I can point to in this like expansion of what we consider masculinity that I can say are positive. And there are certain aspects of it that I'll like absolutely never agree with, right? So yeah, so I see part of the expansion of gender roles or gender norms to be good, and there are parts of it that I think are disastrous.
And this would
Did
be
you
in your
say that men not being able to
disastrous.
hang on? Did you
Hold
say
on,
that
wait.
men not being able to talk about their emotions was a good thing?
Yeah.
No. I said the exact opposite.
Okay.
I said there are certain things that I'm okay with, such as that men being more expressive or being able to talk about their emotions and blah blah blah. Right? I said all of those things are good things.
Okay, but this is in the detrimental category, in your opinion?
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
I guess, Joe, I'll let you ask your question, and I will get back
Sure.
to
Do you
you.
think that this is going to be a weird take, and I'm going to try really hard? Don't cancel me.
No, ask your question.
Okay. Do you think Yachty's desire is authentic here?
I don't know whether he thinks it is or not, but I also don't think it matters.
Gotcha. Because so something that kind of concerns me, and this has kind of been the push of, I don't know how to word this thought properly.
Most
It's gonna be
likely
really
he's doing
messy.
it for money though.
What's
If
that?
I had to bet, most likely it's an opportunity for money, but I don't know his heart, right? So it's
Right.
possible
Like,
that he thinks that this is a moral good, right?
it's impossible to know like the intent of
I
individuals.
agree
right?
with that. It's definitely for money, right?
Yeah.
And I said this earlier. It seems that this is very clearly market segmentation for
Hold
the
on,
sake
wait.
of a profit.
So I want to hear what Joe was going
Detrimental to concepts of masculinity.
Yeah,
I want to hear the rest of Joe. I promise you.
Yeah. I'm somewhere in the middle of Gambit and Empress here, where it's like I have like a high sensitivity test for like the pushing of certain things, because if I understand that social progress, like social progressivism, and the bottom line point in the same direction but never intercross, then I could definitely see a world where Yachty might be just doing this to cash a check, And that's something that I'm actually not necessarily okay with, right? Where I think that like you want to have people who authentically express themselves and authentically sell products in such a way that feels genuine. I don't know if that makes any type of sense, right? Where like if I understand that as an example, one of my favorite jazz musicians, not really jazz musicians, but he's just a clarinet player. He's really big about shoe aesthetic and shoe culture. So like if I see him talking about shoes, then I feel like he's authentically like interacting with people who care about like the shoe game, so to speak, and actually like marketing this product in such a way that's responsible. My concern is sometimes where I think in rap, to Gambit's point, like you get enough white people in a room, they'll be able to rationalize anything and put a face in front of it. Because, and again, like we can't ever get into Lil Yachty's head about this, especially considering he literally made a song called Peekaboo, where one of the lines is "I pull up in the pussy like Peekaboo." So yeah, if there's a rapper that makes a song like that, I would argue he's pretty straight, but but that shouldn't matter, right? But at the same time, I guess I'm concerned about the authenticity of that. That's where I'm stuck on.
Yeah, for sure. It's like there are people that we can point to, that I would say are somewhat trying to uh what's the word that I want to use? Take advantage of the situation of the LGBT, right? Like there are people that authentically may feel this way, and there are people that, because we live in a capitalist society, will look at these movements and try to figure out, well, how exactly can I make a buck out of this? And I think that
Yeah, but it's
this is
not
a
targeting us.
So
Like they're targeting men, right?
Right.
Like LGBT people have been buying like gender non-conformant products for a very long time. We're not the market they're targeting here.
Yeah, Empress, do you think that makeup and stuff like that is or was intentional? I mean, we probably can look into a few books and find the answer here, but I guess like my gut feeling is that these things were non-gendered for a very long time, and then over time, as sort of gender norms in America got kind of codified, these things kind of sort of separated. Does that make sense?
Yes and no, right? So there were always gendered products, but like and things like that, right? But those kind of became more hardline, particularly when you saw an increase in marketing associated with gender, which again was done for profit motive after they realized
Like
that it was more
60s,
profitable that way.
70s,
So like
80s, yeah.
it's kind of a mix. Like yes, there were makeup products that were used by both genders, but makeup as a whole becoming gendered is a much more recent thing.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead, Matt Latin, and then Kato.
No,
And
yeah,
then
so I got
Chris.
two things. The first is that progress is both genuine and fake. There's the genuine folks who are trying to make things change, and then you have all the businesses that try to cash in on it. And like I know that the businesses cashing in on it is like super lame and awful, but the fact that people are trying to profit off of this movement or a movement in general implies strongly that there is money there to profit off of, which means that you have broad societal support for a movement. So I don't want to just like naysay the folks who are fake and participating, because I think they have a role too that can't be ignored. But that's a sideline. I actually wanted to get back to the topic and focus on GSU here. So I wasn't like trying to educate you when I asked like about masculinity as a social construct. I'm not questioning you on that part. I want to know, in your opinion, what about men wearing makeup destroys that social construct? Is it like is it okay? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I think all of us would agree that what you call toxic masculinity would be like it would exclude such behavior, right?
Well, so toxic masculinity is its own separate
Well, masculine. So okay, yeah, okay.
So I don't want to necessarily.
No, wait.
Yeah.
Let's just use different words. I don't care which word we use. We can use gender norms. We can use masculinity. We can use toxic masculinity. Any of those, pick of the litter, right? We could say that the. I don't know why my lights just came on. I don't.
Yeah.
But we can say that this type of behavior is excluded from whatever you think the norm in society has been, right?
Sure.
For whatever specified amount of time. So
something changed, right?
Yes.
But what's the harm is the question.
Okay, so if you're a person like me who embraces those things and think that that culture produces like whatever we would consider like, I don't know, what's the term I want to use? Whatever we would consider like hold on, wait, ask your question again.
I guess to get clarification, I think I can ask this more clearly. What is better about a society, a masculine culture that does not have
Yeah,
makeup and
exactly.
dressing versus
Yeah, so
like
I
I'm just wondering
think
what makes it different.
yeah, so I'm trying to explain. Yeah, because these are like at the root of some of my beliefs. I believe that the emasculation of black men is to keep black men in the situation that we are in society today. So I think the removal of aggression, or at least the training of when to use aggression and how to use aggression, is fundamental to keeping black people in the place that they are today. So I
Questions on
see.
okay. So just to clarify, were you all set on your
Yeah,
point?
pretty
Yeah,
much.
okay.
Yeah.
So I
That
want
should be good enough.
to yeah, okay. So like to further clarify then, what makes the makeup and the dresses or whatever, like femininity being added to masculinity, that emasculates a person, makes them less aggressive? And is aggression inherently related to wearing nail polish? Like, can you get your ass kicked by someone wearing nail polish? Yes or no? I think the answer is yes, right?
Okay,
Like,
okay, wait.
so
Do you
I try to figure out what the
no, yeah.
aggression.
Yeah, I'm trying to answer your question. Okay, when you think of the terms femininity and masculinity, right? Do you think masculinity has a either more aggressive component or a, I don't know what word I want to use. Do you think it's seen as more aggressive in our society? Yes or no?
So traditionally speaking, masculinity is supposed to be like, the aggressive
Yeah,
gender role, right? But that
yeah.
doesn't necessarily have to be the case, is my point. Like, my point is you can have some badasses who are with any kind of gender role in society, generally speaking. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what about
Wait, 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 wait.
I
What you're
think there's
morphing
another
this.
underlying assumption here that's a huge problem, which is
all right,
that somehow masculinity in the black society leads to the empowerment of the black community. Historically, both in Africa and in the United States, social movements that have resulted in an increase in rights, like the civil rights movement, many of the leaders were black women of color, were black and brown women, right? African economic
Wait,
social movements in Africa are often spearheaded by women.
wait.
The Underground Railroad project of mostly women running it, right? Like historically, like again, both in the United States, and in other colonial powers, and in Africa natively, these movements have been primarily run by women. I'm not sure how this I agree that there has been both and not just black men, right? Racial emasculization and hypermasculinization to vilify and disempower communities. Completely agree with that, right? But and yes, this has been used at times to disempower communities. But this seems like saying that there's intent without any real evidence of it. Like I think that's the part that we're missing here. Like, just because he
Yeah.
wants to make a quick buck or make a profit, how does this tie to the broader political motive that you're claiming? I don't think you can demonstrate that at all.
Well, Empress, real quick. I think
Yeah,
something that maybe, again, I agree with the evidence aspect. Very, very, very hard, right? But I think that there something that I could see as a potential threat, kind of like the idea of like, okay, we can't do a certain practice the way that we've been doing it, so we'll do it in another way, and then maybe again, zero evidence on this, so I'm going to tread very carefully. Maybe somebody's fear could be that the power structures that be, whether that be economic structures, political structures, in this case, like unfortunately makeup, it's used as a way to continue that perpetual emasculization. Maybe, like, again, there'd have to be there's I'm the one who's like, I'm not saying that's my claim, but I'm saying, like, if somebody were to feel that there's like the evidence has to be proven there, but I could definitely see something where if you can't oppress someone or emasculate someone a certain way, I'm using emasculate in the context of this conversation, like, people will just find another way to do it. And maybe you can do that through like social progressive things, like the return of gender neutrality with things like makeup.
So-
Maybe.
I wanna
So hold on,
actually
sorry, hon.
challenge-
There's a lot of
That
people
was,
been
that was
waiting.
me hitting a blunt really
There's
hard.
a lot
I'm
of people.
Yeah, I
been,
gotcha.
oh, yeah, sure. So let's go to Katarana, who's waiting, then Chris.
Yeah, I just don't understand how this constitutes as emasculation, and even if somehow this is a form of emasculation, how this could keep Black men down. Masculinity is consistently evolving. What it means to be a man is evolving generation from generation. Yet each generation, as one type of new norm comes in, didn't suddenly experience a crazy drop in testosterone level, and thus like some change in proclivity to be either more violent than their women counterparts. And like just within the last 50 years, a major change in some of the things that we see as being attributed to men is the change in like male basketball shorts. Like as in NBA, it used to be a lot higher, and now they're lower, which is a change in the way that gendered clothing is. Men used to wear a lot tighter pants at some point, and that's not something that we do anymore, which is just
Well, it's back.
constant.
It's back now, right?
Yeah,
Definitely back
I mean,
now.
yeah, but I like in the 70s, a lot of men wore very, very tight, leather pants and stuff.
I'm saying
And
that's back now. That's a
yeah,
thing now, right?
yeah,
At least in
and
American
as
culture.
yeah, and
American
as fashion tends to be cyclic because there's really not that many things that we can do anyways, and we're consistently bored. But all these things didn't suddenly, the change in all of these different types of gender signifiers never really led to some type of crazy change in the way of which men want to go ahead and display some of the more behavioral senses of masculinity. So I just don't entirely understand the idea that somehow with there being this change and men being able to wear nail polish, which is something that will move more towards the gender neutral things. There are already things within our society that are gender neutral. And this isn't really a radical change because within different societies as well, like makeup is something that historically men have worn. Nail polish is something that historically men have worn, and those societies were no
we're
less
not-
aggressive than ours are, or make even be seen as more aggressive than ours are. I just don't see how this is such a crazy radical change, considering like back in the early tens, meaning like 1200s, Indian men used to wear kajol, which is eyeliner, yet they were consistently battling, like literally just permanently
But
in
that doesn't.
immersed in
That doesn't.
battles. I just don't see how this like really
Right, this
matters.
is
Like
silly.
how's that going
This
to
is.
change masculinity behaviors?
Let JSU
Okay.
respond.
Yeah, that was so long. Yeah, so like it goes back to what Empress said earlier. There's cultural influences along with behavior. So saying that there was a society where people wear makeup, or there was a society where people wear dresses, that doesn't mean anything in the context of this conversation, because this conversation is over America, and the American culture and the cultural influences on makeup and dresses and all of these things.
Can I
Right, so
actually
I
ask you a
don't.
question about that, Gambit?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, because like I can actually
Wait, hold on,
understand.
wait, hold on, wait 1 second. Empress asked me a question that I didn't get to answer, and I don't remember what it was now.
So so that's Empress and then Katarana and then Pyrus.
Yeah.
So you have a lot
I
of
wanted-
questions to ask.
I
Answer.
don't know.
Yeah,
100% remember what the question
everybody's
was,
asking
but
me
I had a
questions
number
Yeah,
of
yeah,
critiques.
yeah. So
The biggest one, which was the problem with the underlying assumption that masculinity, or particularly as you associated with violence or other factors, has led to
Well, I said
advancements of
aggression.
rights or
Wait,
liberation.
aggression.
It historically hasn't for the Black community.
Aggression and violence are different words.
Nobody's
I'll
pushing
use
back on the
aggression.
Well, you
important
associate these things with masculinity, and then you said that emasculation would disempower the community. And I'm saying those tendencies have, in the United States at the very least, and in Africa, disadvantaged us historically.
think-
It resulted in the abduction of Africans who got sold into slavery. It resulted in the expansion of the Mali Empire and the force of Islam onto many individuals, which came with many different consequences. So like,
wait, hold on, wait.
You could take this all the way through if you want to talk about gendering. Hang on, if you want to talk about gendering violence and aggression, we could also talk about in during the civil rights movement all the way through to now, in which riots and violence have been shown as ways that we shouldn't be given more rights, ways that we are somehow not worthy of calling something murder, right, when it was murder, right, not worthy of the rights that we're entitled to under our constitution. So I'm just like, it seems like these movements have been primarily led by women.
So,
Okay,
so we got to give space to Gambit to actually respond to all this, right? So Gambit, you respond to Empress, and then Katarana, then we got to go to Chris, and then we'll go to Pyro.
Yeah, so Empress, when I'm trying to interrupt you here, it's because like everybody's talking to me, so I want to understand your point so I can respond. I'm not trying to interrupt you to talk over you, because when you were mentioning,
You're good.
when you were mentioning African stuff, it sounds like you were saying that masculinity led to the enslavement of Africans. I was really trying to understand. I was trying to understand your point.
Led to certain like expressions of masculinity and violence, right? Like this is your attachment between the two, right? You're saying that the emasculation is occurring, aggression and violence is lowered, and these masculine traits are lost, right? And I'm saying that historically, these traits have not advantaged the Black community when we've come into these conflicts. They've disadvantaged us.
Okay, do you think an oppressed people would be better off understanding how to channel aggression or having that aggression curtailed? Which do you think would likely result in a better outcome?
It depends on the situation. It's highly situational. But I'm saying historically that this has not been how we've gotten more rights and how these movements have started in terms of liberation. Almost universally, it hasn't been the case. This is true.
There's been, like, even when you mentioned the civil rights, right? There were riots and there's been things that happened. Like there was, like, I'm a very big fan of nonviolence, right? I'm like one of the biggest MLK fans of all time, right? But I can't say that during that same period of time there wasn't very violent acts that were also, unfortunately, I hate to even say this because it sounds like I'm embracing it, and I'm not at all. But there were acts of violence that was also helping move things forward. I don't embrace riots at all.
Any evidence for that claim.
You don't think there's any claim for?
No, I think that violence was almost universally detrimental to the civil rights movement.
Yeah, you can feel that way, right?
There are some specific examples I think you could point to where this wasn't the case, but it was almost always used to vilify the movement as a whole. You can see, they're literally, you can find political cartoons.
But wait.
We don't want to get too far away from the topic.
With a peaceful protest, with riots happening.
We don't want to get too far away from the topic, so just go down a whole thing about the civil rights film.
Yeah. I just want to say one sentence. Like, vilification does not mean anti-progress, right? That's all I was going to say. But that's
how did the violence lead to progress? That's all I'll say. Moving on.
All right. So then Katarana had something for you. So did you answer what she said?
Wait, did I? I thought I did.
I don't know. Maybe did
Yeah,
you?
no. I think I got my question answered. I'm just gonna keep on listening and see if I have anything additional to pass.
It was Chris. Then you said me.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that that she got a question answered. So Chris,
should we let Fanatic give info?
Oh boy.
No.
Okay, Gambit, no.
Chris, and then Pyro. And then if Fanatic has something to say, we can add him.
Okay, because I wouldn't even want to push back on this so hard. I don't know how anybody didn't really hit this point home. When Jesse, when you said that this like emasculation is what's like keeping Black men and like down in society, I see it as a totally opposite situation. What did they use to classify Black men as super predators? Hyperviolence, hypersexuality, hyperdominance, right? These are all like hyper masculine things, right? These ideas of like Black men's masculinity has been what's been keeping Black men down in society, right? It's what like been pushed in like a lot of like rap music, right? Having all the women, right? And if you don't have it, you're lame. Like you're barely Black. Like the idea of like large penises, like these are all hyper masculine things.
Large penises help us culturally, right?
Yeah,
look, we're in now.
I'm not gonna deny it, but what I'm saying is like this is like this sign of progress of black men being able to express things other than hypermasculinity, to be able to express that they're more than just these things that like these beings of like hyperaggression, like sexuality that you should be scared of. Like now, like we are like we're able to be like empathized with, or like it's seen, we can be seen as other things. It's not like hypermasculine men aren't, black men aren't still around and still aren't like still super popular, more popular than like Little Yachty is, or
How
Young
would
Thug.
argue that's not the case, but
I mean,
go
among
ahead.
kids, maybe because like kids these days are able to look beyond these traditional things that have been so toxic to our culture, right? They're able to like
Wait,
understand that like we can be more than just these like these things, right?
so,
You
so
want to
you
like,
said I want to respond, right? Okay,
you know,
so you talked about the media portrayal of black people, right? I'm not saying that the media hasn't portrayed black people as far more violent than they are by capturing certain incidents and memeing that across the culture, right? But that doesn't mean that aggression is bad. And you guys keep parodying to
it's more
violence and hypermasculinity, and aggression and all of those things are like completely
because
different.
I'm pushing back on this idea that like somehow being less masculine is a detriment to black people, like black men in particular. It is not, right? It is like it's a lot of times very freeing that like a
No,
straight guy like can
no, being more agreeable and all of this psychological data points to this, being more agreeable, you're more likely to go along with things than you are if you're disagreeable. And
what?
disagreeable and controlled aggression is like, no,
You don't think
you
like
can look these things up. You can
people
literally look these things up.
how is the
You
LGBT
can
community
Google it.
and
What?
how is the LGBT community and allies of that community like somehow less agreeable?
Right.
Wait,
Like,
now you
Like more,
I,
more.
now
All right,
you
come on.
I have to read it.
Hey,
hey,
Talking about
everyone,
like
led by women of
hey,
color.
we got to move things along. We have a limited amount of
I
time
can't
left. So
like
go ahead,
yeah
Chris,
like
finish up your
how's
point.
that
you
how's
now
that like
parodied this to the LBGT, but okay, go ahead.
yes, how are like they more agreeable, right? Aren't they like completely
We
opposite to what the culture is like has already been, and like people are fighting against that heavily. Like every time little Yachty does stuff like this, he gets trashed by black media, right? He's done this stuff before, right? And like he gets like torn apart, and like get like I don't understand this. Like, how is
wait,
this
just
what's hurting
just
black men
because
more?
somebody talks against him, torn apart is different. So take this panel for example, right? There's what that like most the largest percentage would give support to this. So the fact that there's somebody that's writing a bad article doesn't mean that the prevailing narrative that he receives is negative. So that's silly, right?
It depends on Prime's audience, though. Yeah.
Yeah, this is we're like a mostly left leaning space. Like,
You wait, you think our culture isn't mostly left leaning? Is that what you're saying?
The audience.
black culture.
You,
The
black
culture,
culture in
the
America?
Well, black
culture.
culture votes consistently Democrat. Like if we're
Yeah,
like we're talking about in the United States.
you don't think black culture in America is more socially left than right?
No, no, it's not.
Depends on
Like,
what you mean.
maybe within like the younger spheres, but like just because of how black people
So okay, we
majority when
gotta
we speak of black culture, it's so
we gotta
related
move it
to
on. We
Christianity.
gotta move it on. We
Okay.
gotta move on. All right. Go ahead, Pyro.
Holy fuck, I actually wanted to talk about like the actual topic and whether this nail polish shit is like anti-masculine and shit. And Gambit, the only question I wanted to ask you, because you seem to be on the stance that there's like
You,
some
you broke up.
aggression factor. Oh, sorry. You brought up like there's some aggression factor that like or whatever you want to call it, traditional masculinity that you want to maintain. So the question I was wondering is like, if they branded this in a way that appealed more to that, would you have a problem with it? Like instead of like calling it like lavender sunshine, if they called it like nail camo or like war polish or whatever, like an appeal to that bullshit right there, like would you be okay with that? Because like we've done that with like perfume and shit. Now we got like the dirty axe cologne that will choke up a high school hallway and it's called bear glove or whatever, right? Like we do that all the time. So like would you be okay if we like move nail polish and dresses and shit into that?
Is this a real no, I shouldn't do to you what Katarana did to me. Yes, you meant the words that you said. No, I wouldn't support that. That's simple. Yeah, no.
Okay.
So is there something else about these things that are anti-masculine other than
No,
just
I
like
think
how
the
our culture
cultural
views them?
the cultural influence of them make them feminine, right? I don't think anybody well, maybe y'all are saying that they're gender neutral. I don't know how everything became gender neutral in our society, but I guess
that's the point.
Wait, well, like, hold up. Well, the thing is that, and like several people have hammered it here.
Wait. So hold on.
No, Gambit. No. Hold on. Can I just finish the point?
Finish your point.
Wait,
please.
you can ask me a question, but I can't ask you one. Right? You asked me a question. I'm asking you something embedded in that. Do you think nail polish and dresses are gender neutral in our society?
Literally going to address that before you interrupted, and I'm going to say, like, yeah, several people on this panel have hit on the point that, like,
you didn't answer my question.
I'm answering your question right now. Oh, holy shit. Yes, I'm answering your question. Throughout history, yeah, these things have gone through periods where, like, yeah, they have been gender neutral.
History. I'm talking about right now. Don't parry.
Do you want to hear his answer, or do you want to hear yourself talk?
Listen, time out. I'm sorry, Gambit, that this isn't a strict, like, yes or no question for you.
The answer was if
you don't care what the answer is, then why ask me the fucking question?
I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you what happened in 1705, 1819. I'm not asking you what happened in 1348. I'm asking you in 2021. Do you believe that dresses and nail polish are gender neutral? That's the question I ask you. I don't give a fuck about the historical, all of this other shit. I'm asking you right now.
I believe they can. I believe they can be 100%. I believe they can be. Do you want me to give my explanation for that, or are you just like, holy fucking shit, dude? There's an explanation behind the answer.
Guys, everyone, put your hands down because we don't have much time. So just put your hands down. We'll go. So you can finish your answer to that, Pyro. Then I'm going to Fanatic.
Very quickly, like everyone else has said on this panel before, throughout periods of history, this shit has gone through very periods where it's like, you know, it can be gender neutral. I believe we're going through one right now where dresses, makeup, and shit are becoming gender neutral in our fucking culture, in our society. We see that on a mass fucking scale. To deny that, you would have to literally not open a book or not accept anything within front of your own eyes.
You went super robot there, but we heard you. Super Sentai in this bitch. Yeah, all right, let's go to Fanatic.
Wow, this is crazy. So yeah, I think wow, I wish I'd have been here from the very beginning. I obviously agree with Gambit in most of what he's talking about here. I don't think nails and makeup are in any case gender neutral. It's very, very obvious. If you were to look at what they're typically marketed towards, if you look at typically like what the average consumer is using, they are very obviously not gender neutral. They're very obviously feminine. There's an obvious trend there. Same thing with dresses. I feel like I'm being as generous as I can possibly be when I'm saying 95% of dresses purchased and worn in this country are worn by women. So it's really crazy to me that we want to get fast and loose all of a sudden with gender really quickly. Right? We understand that there are gender norms, and we understand that these things are not fixed in the same sense as like maybe like some other like biological components and things like that. Gender is obviously going to be a social construct. So when you start trying to derive what is socially constructed, you typically look at some of the applications of those social things. And the application of dresses is going to be obviously done by its consumption and its marketing and its branding, and that's obviously going to be feminine. The idea that there would be an assault on black male masculinity is absolutely well-founded. We have so many different examples of that. There's been constant demonization. I remember one of the earliest racist jokes I heard when I was a kid, where they'd ask, what's the difference between a black man and a medium pizza? And it would say the pizza can feed a family of 4 and all that. Like the whole constant idea that there's been always an assault against the masculinity of black men. They've used it to exaggerate it, to demonize us at one point, and then they've done the exact opposite where they've tried to feminize us in other ways. I don't know how we would even like argue against this. It's constantly being rallied against every time it happens, and it's trying to be exaggerated in the media whenever you have all of these black male masculine figures wearing dresses and things like that. They try to do that to literally all of them. If you remember, there was a big thing with Dave Chappelle where he gave an interview where they tried to force him to do it in his movie, and he like repeatedly said like, no, I'm not doing it, and they like kept insisting. By the time they were done, they had like 6 different people from the film production crew. I mean, not production, not the crew, but like from the higher ups, the executives within this movie, all came trying to force him to do it. He like literally insisted and was like, I'm not doing it. And they're like, oh, okay, we have another script right here. It's okay, we don't need that scene. We'll just go forward with it. And he's like, why do they have to do that literally every time? There has always been an attempt to do it. They did it with Terry Crews. They're doing whatever. Tariq Nasheed just recently released a documentary called Buck Breaking. I think it's really relevant to this topic. I'll probably purchase that today and go ahead and give that a watch. I haven't seen it. I don't know, but it just seems like this has been like a talking point within the African American community, and I think that documentary will probably be a good elucidation of it. I'm hoping.
Matt Latin, Colorado.
I mean, the problem with this thesis is this idea that becoming more feminine makes you weaker somehow, and that's not true. Like, there's this whole presumption that if you emasculate someone, that they're not going to be able to take care of themselves as well as they used to. And I think that is where our miscommunication is. Like, the point is that even if someone is wearing nail polish or has dresses being advertised to them or whatever, and they purchase these products, that it's somehow going to make them weaker. And it's not true. There's no relationship between men buying nail polish and men being able to feed their families. It's not the same thing whatsoever. It's two completely different universes here, right? And you're trying to put it all in like this sort of like somewhat paranoid concept, like idea that like black men are being turned into some sort of a new kind of victim, when the victimization is already there. You don't need to make up new ways that black males are being victimized. We're all experiencing it all the time. We're being pulled over. We're being whatever. And like, so I don't think we need ghosts to look at and be paranoid about. I think we need to focus on like the real topics and not give a shit about whether people are buying nail polish or not. There's nothing to be passionate about here. People wear nail polish, and sometimes they'll be awesome, and sometimes folks won't buy it, and that's fine, right? Like, you don't have to force people to wear the nail polish, but you can't like rage against the folks who are advertising and creating these products. We have enough problems to deal with already.
Wait, hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. Carolina has to go first. That is just ludicrous. Come on, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll go. It's just really strange, I guess, that we're allowing the markets to be the sole indicator of what is not sole indicator, but one of the indicators as to what is considered masculine or not. I mean, we already have video. What do you call it? The markets that tell people, hey, video games are for boys, because they decide to go ahead and market it that way. All of these things are a bunch of just numbers on a spreadsheet for like markets to just say, hey, where could we maximize the most money? Okay, well, we definitely go ahead and maximize profits when we cater to a specific audience. So we're going to say that this specific product is for men, and this product is for boys. Cooking Mama is for girls. COD is for boys, etc. And it's just really strange that like we're essentially going to just sit there and say, yeah, well, the market has been going ahead and advertising to women for makeup and nail polish. And even though we're able to look at historical things to show that this is all arbitrary as shit, well, in current society, I'm saying it's not arbitrary. But there's been periods where, it's been for men, it's been for both genders, it's been for women. But for some reason, we're just going to go ahead and like dig our heels in the sand and say, no, what it is right now for women, and it needs to be for women, and anything that is a change to that is going ahead and further leading to the masculization of men. It's like, if your gender is really that weak, that just going ahead and adding a nail polish is enough to cause the collapse of black men as we know it, then I don't know, man, let it collapse. Clearly it's not doing very well.
Wait, please don't dogpile on that, because this is like both of you guys are being completely ridiculous. I don't know how you guys think that you're.
Oh my god, here we go.
Help me.
Let him speak.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys are being so hyperbolic. This is insane. I don't think Gambit, myself, or anyone else would be making the claim that like just the simple advertising of these things are going to be the collapse of black men as a whole. This is stupid. No one's making that argument. If you actually want to address the things that we're actually talking about, please do so. But don't just start strawmanning. Wait, don't. No, let me finish talking.
Here we go.
Don't just start strawmanning.
Look how effective aggression.
Notice how quiet I was. Notice how quiet
your
I was.
arguments are winning.
Oh crap! Everyone, shut up! Who's not Fanatic? Let him talk. Like you made your points. Let him respond. Fanatic,
Notice
please.
how quiet I was till I got interrupted. Shut the hell up. Anyway, so my point is, first off, like I think this whole argument about we don't need ghosts to attack, and it's not about finding ghosts. The fact of the matter is we do have historical context to demonstrate how black masculinity has been abused in various ways for different agendas. As we already mentioned, the hypersexualization of the blaxploitation era, they literally used that for I can't even think of the name of the movie, the one where they did the blackface, something I don't know, the one where they did the Birth of a Nation. It was about black man's hypersexuality and their lust for white women. It wasn't even someone's wife. This is crazy. So I think the idea. I'm sorry. The idea is ultimately like, yes, black masculinity has been attacked and used and exploited in various ways. There's a constant demonization of black masculinity when it comes to being able to provide in the home, which is like I said, this is historical. Then secondly, someone saying that we shouldn't, Katarana, you made the statement that we shouldn't be using markets to determine how things are applied. This is absolutely absurd. I could totally understand the idea that video games are for women, and we've seen these numbers grow. Fortunately, we have statistics for these things. So it was like as low as 38% of females video game usage was only 38% female back in 2006. It's grown. It's gone up to 41% in 2020. It used to be significantly lower in the 80s, and it's been like on a trend of going up. Yes, it was marketed towards men, but typically people tend to market things towards the audience that's more likely to consume them. So in this case, males happen to be particularly more familiar with video games and to partake in that. It was more sociologically like associated with their culture. So then that's the thing that they're going to market to. The reason why you use markets and why you would use data like that is because typically that kind of shows where the trends are. A lot of times, if we're going to just decide that there's no data or no markets or no information that we're going to rely on, then I guess it's just going to be based on your feelings. And I don't care about your feelings. I don't care about anyone's feelings. What I'm always going to appeal to is the data. The data very clearly demonstrates the idea that freaking makeup has typically, especially over like the last century, been associated with males. Been associated with females. So like the idea that we're going to sit here and pretend that it's not is ridiculous.
Can I ask a quick question?
Wait,
Emperor, I got a quick question because, like, I believe you're right, Mr. Fanatic. Over the last century or so, you can't say, like, sure, it has been targeted that way. Do you think that in, like, last 10 or so years, it's been changing?
I think there's been a lot more attempts. There's been a lot more attempts to change it. I would like to see some figures and some data. I would still argue that probably, as I said before, 95%, and I feel like I'm being extremely generous there, 95% of dresses are still worn by women. The average male, I would imagine, would still tell you that dresses are not for women. So even though there's been changes in the media, typically with strong black figureheads where they will wear dresses, right? We saw one with Kanye. We see them with various rappers wearing these weird things. It doesn't even make any sense.
No,
so yes,
now,
there's
like,
changes within those figureheads, but is there changes in typical usage amongst young black men or
the question,
people? No.
This argument is dumb. The second question by men is wood now gendered? Like,
hold on. No, the question I would ask to that is, like, we've been talking about markets and how they might influence. Do you think these, like, these figureheads that have you, like, maybe they're looking at markets and something's telling them that, like, yeah, this might be the time, little yachty, to maybe try and release a fucking nail polish brand, camo paint. Like, why not?
As a musician, that's kind of not typically the way things work. So typically the way these things work is that most of their attire and things aren't decided on by themselves. Typically these things are, they have an image consultant and they have managers that will literally provide them with the car they drive, with the dates that they take whenever they show up to various things, with the clothes that they'll be wearing. This isn't things that are typically done by the artists themselves. And so no, this isn't artists coming around and saying, this is what I think, where I think things are going, and so I'm going to partake in this. Typically what it ends up being is an actual agenda.
Well, I didn't say that. Well, hold on. You're actually, like, mischaracterizing what I said. I didn't say that they were deciding, like, yes, this is where I think they're going. I'm saying that they're looking at information that's not their opinions, right? And, like, you're right, they do have teams and shit behind them, but, like, are these people just deciding it on their own whims? Like, yes, we want people to wear dresses now, or that they looking at some type of trend, whether it be international or, within our own borders, that are saying, like, this might be the way to go for them to remain popular?
I don't think in a lot of these times, a lot of this stuff, it can be done for shock value. I don't think it's necessarily because of the fact that trends are showing there. If you can show me any trends that indicate that dresses are starting to become significantly more gender neutral, I'd be more than willing to entertain that. I know that you live in the real world just like I do. I know that that just outside of television, you don't see men walking around in dresses. You don't see this. And we can see this because there's all and I know you can see this. I know. I'm going to finish my statement, Empress. You can shut the hell up and ask me your question after we're done, because we're having a respectful conversation. Learn how to be decent. Pyro, I would say
I wish you
like
could.
you, I would say you living in the same world that I do, that you're aware, just like I am. I've literally never seen men wearing dresses who are like trying to
So
present.
I
as
can
men.
actually
It's not a
answer.
thing
I'll actually
need to.
no, hold up, Empress. I'll actually answer to that because like I do live in the same real
Make it
world
quick.
that you
Make
live
it
in.
quick,
I
because
am. And in the same real world that I live in, you know, I've seen people wear the equivalent of dresses and skirts, but for cultural reasons, they call them something different. Right? I live in a lot of Muslim Muslim heavy areas, and they wear those long robes or whatever. I don't know what they're
You're saying
called,
robe
but
is the
you know
same as a
what? They're like
skirt?
fucking. No, I'm saying it's basically the
Wait,
same
why
as
are you
like a
going
long
from dress to
fucking
skirt,
dress.
my dude?
Jesus Christ,
No,
holy
they're
shit!
not at
You want
all the
to
same
talk
thing.
about? Hold up, you want to talk about skirts? I live in like Buffalo, New York, is also has like a lot of Irish people. I see people in kilts, right? Fucking skirts. Like yeah,
I love this.
for
I love
different
this
reasons we
discount.
call them
love this.
something different, but yeah.
Pyro, that's really absurd, and here's the reason why. So even in like in the old days, right, when people wore robes, right, like in the Bible times, like people were wearing robes.
Hey.
There was still a very obvious difference between a male's robe and a woman's robe. There was still a very
Depends on the
obvious
country.
difference, and so like literally trying to compare a kilt to a dress or a skirt, or trying to compare any of these things, that is not the same thing. There is very obvious male attire and women attire in most cultures. And I would say I would help if you can show me a culture where there is no distinction. I'd look
Okay,
for it.
but the
I don't
thing
really
is,
think
like, in this
making this comparison
Well,
no,
from
in
Western
this,
dresses to
Hey,
Latin
we
kilts
gotta
one of
to
the
move on.
things-
Sorry,
Irish.
Pyro, we gotta move on. We don't have very much
Oh,
time.
Pyro, I just want to say, Pyro, notice that you didn't mention black culture at all. You tried to parry to other cultures and religions and stuff. So
I literally
when-
hold up. Whoa, I literally mentioned that I live in a heavily Muslim
Oh,
area.
boy.
That like they're not black
So we're
culture, but they are
going-
people of color. But okay.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, he said black.
Great. We're going to Empress, and then Joe. We have time. We'll do somewhere else, but like probably not. We don't have much time left.
I'll make this really quick because Fanatic, you're talking about data. We had this question already in stream. I've asked you and GSU this question repeatedly now. I asked from the pretty much moment you entered.
I
Where
asked
is
you
your
to not answer
that
a
this is
question.
resulting in a masculization that has a political, cultural, economic, or some sort of negative net negative effect? You have no evidence for this claim whatsoever. This is one of the core claims of the argument.
Wait, so you're saying I need to show you data that shows that the intentional emasculation. I'm sorry, that
That's not what I said.
abuse. So I'm trying to rephrase it to make sure that I'm understanding. So it sounded like you were saying that I need to find some sort of data that shows that the masculation. I'm sorry, that the masculinity of African Americans being attacked has had any like quantifiable harmful effects. Is that what you're asking me
So far
for?
from what I said, like
Okay, then
I'm not
say
asking
it one more time.
has history had this. You've said this multiple times. You said history. I'm talking about right now. The thing
Okay,
that we're
right
talking
now.
about right now
Okay, what are
is
you asking
resulting
right
in
now?
a masculinization of black men that's resulting in negative outcomes of some kind. I think this is a baseless claim.
So look, so this is one, it's absurd. What the reason why I would appeal to history in these kinds of conversations is because typically when if you're asking me a question about something that's happening right now, I'm not going to be able to give you data right now that this attack right now has an effect right now. Though
But
that
that's
would
what
be
you do with
next.
the
That would have to be next year, and then we'd be able to find out what's happening right now. That's why I kept telling you about in
This
the
has been a
past.
trend for years.
That's why I kept telling you about in the past the way that these things have happened. Which is why I was originally going to answer your question as, are you asking me for data from the past that clearly demonstrates the masculinity of African Americans being used to attack people and it having harmful effects? And I could show you that, and then therefore we'd be able to juxtapose
Don't need you to.
that
I know
next
it
to
happened.
right now.
Agree.
And, okay, good. So then if you can see that, juxtaposing that to right now, then you could say, if this was harmful then, it can be harmful now. I would need you to show me something
possibly, if you have evidence
I would need you to show me something that would say right now this is going to be distinct from the things that have previously obviously had a deleterious effect on African Americans previously. Do you have
you would need to demonstrate
right now that would make
you haven't demonstrated that a masculinization is occurring, right? You simply stated it is. What's happening is marketing of a product towards men. Like, this is very different from saying this. Like, people reappropriating things between genders has happened throughout history and had nothing to do with the masculinization. There are specific instances where it has been related to that. You would need to demonstrate that this is an instance of that with some sort of evidence of either intentionality, effect. Like, you have none of this. Nothing.
I'm sorry.
This is just a baseless claim.
I'm sorry. You're saying it's baseless because you're not choosing to live in reality. Here's the only claim that I need to make.
Oh, you're living in fiction land where there's no data to prove this.
All we have to do is come to a conclusion that clearly dresses are feminine, and that clearly that they are
And?
associated with women. And if they are, and we can show that there is this attempt in having young Black influential males be used in order to represent or to dress in these feminine clothes, that in and of itself would be something that would influence other young Black males to try to to try to imitate these things.
How does? But you're not demonstrating masculinization.
No, the first thing listen, if
this is demonstrating a cultural shift, not the claim that you're making of a masculinization.
No, see, I'm sorry. If you can't keep up with the conversation, the reason why we need you going back circularly to get back to the point of if this is a cultural shift, which, as I've stated before, I'm sure we're all aware now that the 95% of dresses are still worn by females. So then again, this is not a cultural shift.
This is not we are in the middle of a cultural shift towards queerness.
Again, this is not a cultural shift. This is not a cultural shift for feminization.
It's empirically a cultural shift.
This is a cultural. This is an image shift on influential figures. This is not a cultural shift. This is influencers trying to.
There are more queer people and gender non-conforming people now than any other point in modern history.
This has nothing to do with queerness. Again, you're moving the goalpost because this isn't a conversation about queerness.
This is the conversation of gender non-conforming, which is what this is.
I'm gonna finish. This is a conversation about masculine males being made to wear feminine garb.
Yeah,
this is
they're not being made. They're choosing to do it.
You're moving the goalpost. So if you
not moving the goalpost, they're choosing to wear clothing and engage in gender non-conforming behavior because they reject this dichotomy. It's not being forced on them. They're choosing to do it.
So the first, let me finish your point, and then we'll go to Joe. And we can continue this in open panel. We can actually, right?
For that. The first challenge, the first challenge that you gave me was specifically if I could see if they were feminizing.
You showed data that it was
after Jesus Christ, you can't shut up. After I go and point to you that obviously it must be feminizing people to have masculine males wearing feminine things, then obviously that would be
emasculation.
When you asked that was the first. Then you moved the goalpost to second point to now.
No, I didn't. I asked you the same question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I asked you the same question times, and you.
Okay, great. Stop. Thank you. Joe Lewis, make your point. And again, we can continue. It's on the open panel, but
okay, maybe this will matter in the opening panel. So I'm doing very carefully as I do this. So I'm trying to make a roller coaster to you as I talk.
Joe, you gotta stay.
Let me pause my roller coaster game. Okay, so just some thoughts, right? Traditionally, men weren't strangers to wearing skirts and dresses, right? So we're gonna make that part clear. However, something that I think is important here that I think Fnatic and Gambit are knocking on the door at indirectly is that men over time, right, these things were sort of codified in such a way where they weren't sort of practices in terms of expression. They were usually in terms of practicality. The best thing I could think of that my stupid brain could produce was that protest that was French bus drivers did, where they basically weren't allowed to wear shorts, so they're all right, bet, so they wore skirts instead. So there was a little resistance to what was considered norm, but it wasn't a matter of greater tolerance for diversity of men's clothing. It was men embracing skirts as part of everyday attire. So something that I'm curious of, and maybe Fnatic you can answer this. We were talking about just things like makeup and even dresses and skirts. Do you think it's possible for men to embrace what we can call alternative clothing here, like skirts and dresses, in a 2021 landscape?
Wait, really quickly, since we were talking about cultures that wear dresses and how there aren't any that wear things that are really identical to what women wear, I pulled up this photo where literally the clothing that the women are wearing, not me, I'm wearing a skirt, but the women to the left of me and the guys to the right of me are wearing identical clothing. The only difference is color, but it's called a kurti, and the female version, girls wear kurtis, guys wear kurta. The only reason what makes it a kurti and a kurta is because when girls wear something, you put an I in Hindi, and when something is something that a guy does, he puts an A. But they are identical clothing because the way that the garment goes down to basically around your ankle length, and then you wear pants underneath it. So you can see that the men and the women are wearing identical clothing in this photo, which basically looks like a dress. So just to show, men do wear dresses. And this photo was taken right before the pandemic. And yeah, men wear clothes that are very similar to what women are wearing in different cultures. So, and this is still considered a
to help out
masculine
my
garment.
man, to help out my man Fanatic in GSU, right?
I had a
Isn't it?
question
Hold
that
on, hold on. But like the question wasn't whether we have like unisex clothing. Unisex clothing exists, right? So there's plenty of examples of clothing within the Western cultures, right? That are identical between men and women. But like
No, but we were saying that there are no cultures
sorry,
where men
like-
wear dresses, and that is basically a dress that I was
Can-
showing.
okay.
I just want to address something a second.
Joe,
though.
no, Joe.
It was literally illegal in New York City to wear skirts in public as a male until this
shit.
year.
Amber,
This idea that
Amber,
cultural shit is
okay,
ridiculous.
I'm gonna have
won't
to
shut
mute
up.
you. I'm
You
gonna have
gotta
to
mute.
you.
She just doesn't know how to be quiet.
I don't think you. All right, go ahead, Joe, please.
So the question I asked before Katarana just
I remember the question, Joe. I remember. I remember. It was basically you were asking the question of if that can eventually happen. And the thing is, it is something that can eventually happen. The thing is, for me, I guess the thing that makes me a little bit resistant to it is because it's hard for me to divorce that sort of thing, which it seems like there is an agenda to push this trend. It's hard for me to divorce that from what it seems like has been a nonstop attack on Black men in this country for God knows how long. So for me, it's something that I'm always going to feel that there's a problem with, right? And I feel like I feel the same way towards sagging pants. I think there has been an obvious, and I know this is the boomer in me talking here, but I think do you know how often people like my parents and the strong Black males in like that were in the generation above me, how they were always clearly like saying, hey, like this is not something that doesn't make any sense. Like we understand like the origins of this thing. It seems really ridiculous to be showing your butt, like all of these things. So like to me, I'm always going to see a problem with that. And the fact that those kind of things are normalized are always going to be harmful to me.
And something is like a follow-up to that, which kind of gets me thinking, is that like, you know, women embrace trousers, and there was a conscious effort in embracing trousers, in embracing the pantsuit, just as a way for literally just men's jobs, and also just like the expression of power. And I think somewhere in your argument here, your concern is, and again, I'm not trying to like put words in your mouth here. It's just like what it's like projecting to me, at least, is that your concern is that because of that, how clothing is sort of codified in a way, and like clothing, and then just like certain expressions, whether it be nail polish, makeup, and stuff, like there is sort of like a hierarchical thing to that. Embracing alternative styles like nail polish for men, dresses for men, despite the fact that people wear these things already, even though you can say it's a minority group of individuals. I guess your concern is that like that shift of the sort of hierarchical type of thing. Is that a correct characterization?
Not entirely, right? Because here's the deal: when women started wearing pants, it was like largely work related, right? Because dresses were significantly less viable in certain jobs, and like after the war, women had started working, and then women started doing jobs that men had been doing because men had been off in the war. So all those things made all the sense in the world. It was just a natural progression of things, and then in that also you're 100% right for pointing out something I wouldn't have thought to say. But yes, during the feminist movement and things like that, they were absolutely looking at these. This was like a power signal, like to be able to say like I can do anything that a man can do. We can be in the same positions as men. This is something that's typically associated with masculinity, which is sometimes associated with power unfairly. And so women were like, nope, we're doing these things too. We wear suits. We can be whatever. And I think all those things that make sense to me when something is done in that with the spirit of it. The difference, I guess, would be always going to be behind what's the intent behind it. If Black culture had been making this shift naturally, and this happened to just be something that powerful people were doing, then I can't be the arbiter of Black culture. But to me, it does seem somewhat more nefarious when it's not. It doesn't sound like there's a cultural shift that's happening, and then that these powerful people reflecting that. Sure. It seems like these powerful people are doing this thing to try to influence the culture, and that seems somewhat nefarious.
But you could say maybe because there are individuals who do wear dresses, right? Like I own a romper. I'm never gonna wear this romper on stream because it has little duckies on it. But it's in that closet. It's in there chilling. But my point here is that like maybe there is something to be said about men using things like dresses, skirts, makeup, nail polish as a level of resistance. But I guess maybe one of your concerns here is maybe if the resistance is genuine. Maybe does that make sense?
Wait, what do you mean about what do you mean by resistance from what?
So there's this like idea as an example when it comes to, I'm going to use tuxedos as an example, right? So like when you go to certain things like weddings, like the suit and tuxedo, those two things kind of go hand in hand, mainly the suit, right? But then on one hand, like what's stopping someone like a man, for instance, like pushing against that idea of like, I'm not going to wear a suit to this. I'm going to wear something else to this that I feel like is still like formal and chic, but isn't just this sort of normality of a level of expression. So I think there is something in there with like clothes and the way that we express ourselves that does go against that counterculture.
Well, for
Right.
sure. And for me, listen, I'm all for freedom. And if an individual decides to do that, I have literally no problem with it, which is why I was saying this, I think lines up with what my closing thing in the last response, in that I'm all for culture deciding what culture wants to be. And when culture shifts in given ways, that's just the world we live in. Not everyone's going to be stuck in the 90s like I was, right? Or like I am probably in some ways. I'm a boomer. But the idea is, if these things happen like naturally and organically by individuals, I'm fine with that. But that, again, this top-down influence is a problem. I loved hip hop for being a good reflection at one point of what Black culture was. I do not like the current hip hop, which it seems like powerful individuals with lots of money have begun injecting all sorts of very harmful stereotypes and harmful characterizations, which are not reflective of the community. And now you have the community and the culture trying to influence that. I think those are two different things: top down and organically ground up. And I'm always
So just so I'm
okay.
really clear here.
Oh my
yeah.
God, you got to make it.
Yeah, very quick. So your argument is that like if this was something that was like cultivatedly grown that we could see, I guess at like the ground level, quote unquote, like even though we can see up to an extent, but like I feel like for you, your holdup might be the fact that it's coming from so high up, and then like it's saying like this. The fear is like this is what the standard is, everybody. When in reality, it might not be the case. Right?
Well, it's not coming from